Chapter 1107. Hua Tianxiang blushed and nodded. Li thank you. Silly, what are you thanking me for? Yi Li smiled. As long as you are happy and third brother is happy, everything will be fine, right? Hua Tianxiang nodded. Yes, everything is in the past. We will all be better in the future. Reporting to Princess Consort, the bridal procession has arrived. The maid outside the door reported. Yi Li nodded and smiled. I know, come in. She stood up and took the dragon and phoenix veil and personally covered Hua Tianxiang's head. Empress Hua also took the veil and covered Wu You's head. The matron of honor and the maidservants who had been waiting outside hurriedly came in and carefully led the two brides out. Yi Li turned around and smiled. All right, let's get ready to go to the Su family and join in the fun. Quickly go back and change your clothes. Because of the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family, the wedding was held together. After the brides left, all the guests would go to the Su family to attend the banquet. As a result, everyone was saved from a difficult situation. After all, although the girl who was marrying into the Prince Ding mansion was not Prince Ding's biological sister, she was still marrying from the Prince Ding mansion. No one dared to not go. As a result, wouldn't the Su family have no one to congratulate them? Now that they were being held together, it was convenient for everyone to be more lively. Late at night, the Su family mansion was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, bustling with noise and excitement. The master of ceremonies shouted, "Send them to the bridal chamber." The newlyweds who had just bowed to heaven and earth were escorted to the east. When the banquet began, the entire Su family mansion became more lively. The main hall was filled with singing and dancing, and the fragrance of wine permeated the air. Even the two masters of the Su family, who were usually dignified and elegant, couldn't help but drink a few more cups, and their elegant faces became more colorful. The two Madams Su led Qin Zheng around the banquet table with smiles on their faces, taking very good care of her. The courtyard outside the main hall was also filled with banquet tables prepared for the guests who were not qualified to sit in the main hall. Although she was sitting outside, the light from the makeup made it seem like it was daytime. Although they couldn't enjoy the singing and dancing inside, the sky outside was filled with colorful fireworks. Furthermore, second young Master Su and fifth young Master Su from the Su family were there to accompany them personally. While the celebration was going on, two people were sitting on the roof of the Su family, leaning against each other. The man's long white hair glowed with a faint silver light under the moonlight. His long white hair and the woman's black hair intertwined with each other in the breeze. Yi Li sat beside Mo Xiuyao and gently rested her head on his lap. Her eyes seemed to be enjoying the tranquility amidst the hustle and bustle. Mo Xiuyao's eyes were as gentle as water. He raised his hand and gently touched her slightly red cheeks. He laughed in a low voice and said, "They are getting married. Why is Mr. Li so happy?" Yi Li opened her eyes. There was still a faint smile in her eyes. Just now she had drunk a few more cups of wine. Her face was more rosy than usual and her eyes were more smiling. Of course I am happy that third brother and fourth brother are getting married. However, isn't this what I am most happy about? Mo Xiuyao intimately brushed away the hair by her cheek and asked, "What is it then?" Yi Li smiled and said, "We can finally live our lives happily, right?" Mo Xiuyao smiled. He lowered his head and pressed his forehead against Yi Li's. He smiled and said, "Yes, we don't have to fight anymore. We don't have to fight in the open or in the dark. In this world no one will dare to bother us anymore. From now on we can live whatever life Mr. Li wants." Yi Li nodded and said, "It's good that we don't have to fight anymore. The commoners are very pitiful. Now that the world is at peace we don't have to do anything. I won't feel guilty. No matter what the world becomes, Mr. Li doesn't need to feel guilty," Mo Xiuyao said gently. "There is no woman in the world who can do better than Mr. Li." Yi Li smiled and said, "If the world is still in chaos and I still insist that you give up everything to accompany me, then I will feel guilty. Yes. That would be unreasonable." Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and said softly with a smile, "Mr. Li can be unreasonable. No matter what Mr. Li wants, it is always right. Is Mr. Li drunk?" Yi Li leaned against Mo Xiuyao's chest and shook her head. She closed her eyes sleepily and said, "The way things are now is very good. It will be even better in the future." Mo Xiuyao gently pulled her into his arms and said, "What is very good?" Yi Li said, "The way things are now is very good. In the future, The rivers are clear and the seas are clear. The four seas are peaceful. When we go out to play we will see the common people living and working in peace and contentment. Mo Shuyao smiled and said, I know Mr. Li doesn't like to fight. I remember Mr. Li's poem. Pitiful white bones piled up in a lonely grave, all for the general's military exploits. I'm not talking about you. I don't know, the rivers are clear and the seas are peaceful. Let's leave this goal to Mr. Mo. Mr. Li, what do you think? Mo Shuyao lowered his head and smiled. A soft kiss fell on her blushing face. Bam bam. In the distance, several huge fireworks bloomed in the sky, blooming with beautiful light and flowers. Yili opened her eyes at some point. The man's expression was reflected in her gentle eyes. Xiao, I love you. Looking at the man's handsome face, gentle eyes and snow-white hair, Yili suddenly opened her mouth. It wasn't hard to say love. What was hard was to hold hands and live and die together. Even after the world was in their hands they still loved each other deeply. Mo Shuyao was slightly stunned. His handsome eyes flashed with joy and satisfaction. Sui, Mr. Li, for all eternity, I will only love you. He lowered his head and gently covered her dark red lips. Yili raised her hand and held his shoulder. For all eternity, I will love you. If it weren't for me, you would have already ascended the throne and created a new era of peace and prosperity. Mo Shuyao insisted on not ascending the throne. Yili understood that most of it was for her sake. Because he knew she didn't want to be in the palace, and because he promised to give her the one and only in this life. Mo Shuyao laughed softly. Mr. Li, without you, where would the peace and prosperity of the Prince Ding mansion come? The dazzling fireworks in the night sky continued to bloom. The two sat side by side and snuggled up to each other, quietly enjoying the dazzling scenery. When Xiaobao grows up, I will accompany Mr. Li to travel thousands of miles in mountains free and unfettered. As long as our family is together, no matter when or where, I will feel free and unfettered. Meeting Mr. Li was the best thing that happened to Mo Shuyao in this life. In both my previous and current life, meeting you was also the happiest thing that happened to me. If I could meet you, so what if I had to suffer and experience life and death? If I could meet you, so what if I had to travel through time and experience the world? Bam! The red fireworks bloomed into a gorgeous peony in the air, transforming into a huge handwriting that read, May you be together for 100 years. Meeting you in this life, I only wish for 100 years of bliss and peace. 5 years later, Prince Ding passed on the throne of the Prince Ding mansion to crown Prince Mo Yuchen and left with the princess consort. From then on they lived a carefree life and no longer cared about the world. Mo Yuchen succeeded the position of Prince Ding and once again refused the request of the ministers to ascend the throne. He worked hard to govern the country, and the power of the Prince Ding mansion became stronger and stronger. 13 years later, Prince Ding's brother Mo Yufeng, who was 14 years old, was appointed as the Grand Marshal of the Prince Ding mansion. He swept the West Hill and the West Hill bowed down. Mo Yuchen, the Prince Ding, personally led the northern tribes and retreated to the western icefield. The Mahist army arrived at the Yunlon River. Mo Yufeng personally persuaded the southern Chu to surrender. The Emperor Chu of the southern Chu saw the general trend and voluntarily submitted to the Prince Ding mansion. From then on the world was peaceful. Mo Yuchen ascended the throne at the age of 30 and named the country Kli. At the age of 30 Mo Yuchen ruled the world. From then on the world was unified. One of the most powerful dynasties in the history books began. End of text. Chapter 1108. Mo Xiaobao, full name Mo Yuchen, the heir of the Prince Ding mansion. If you want to ask who has the strongest background in the world, the answer of everyone in the world is the same, Mo Yuchen. The domineering Prince Ding Mo Shuyao is his father. The Princess Ding Yili, who is also famous for holding the most elite qilin in the world, is his mother. The head of the world, Mr. Qingyun, is his grandfather. Mr. Hongyu and Mr. Hongyan are his granduncles. The 5 young masters of the Su family are his uncles. The most important thing is that he has a unique position in the Su family. Even if a pair of younger siblings were added later, it has never been shaken. But if you want to ask who is the most miserable person in the world, little Shizemo will tell you. It is also Mo Yuchen. Little Shizemo thinks that the reason why he has such a miserable life is all because he has a father who can cheat his son the most. So much so that he dreams of becoming a son who can cheat his father. Emo Xiaobao's miserable life began from the moment he was born. When he was born, perhaps before he was born, his father blamed him for eating too much, causing his dear mother to suffer and become thin. When he was born, his father thought that he was too much of a tormentor, causing his mother to suffer too much. Even after he was born, his father thought that his mother paid too much attention to him and was jealous. He also gave him a nickname that would make him unable to raise his head for the rest of his life. So when Emo Xiaobao grew up, every time he recalled it, he felt that his childhood was a big cupboard full of tableware. His mother once comforted him that the name Xiaobao was very cute and cute. Emo Xiaobao agreed very much. Before he was 10 years old, this name had always been very cute and cute. So Emo Xiaobao also learned how to sell his cuteness. But when he grew up, he found that his mother's comfort was really a white lie. When his nickname spread throughout the Mahist army and slowly spread out, he finally understood his father's sinister intentions. Although Emo Xiaobao's life before he was 10 years old was full of fighting wits and courage with his father, it was generally relaxed and happy. But his good days came to an end after his younger brother and sister's first birthday. On the second day of his younger sibling's first birthday, he received a 3-month confinement. 3 months later, when he finally crawled out of his own courtyard and thought that he might have autism, he was thrown into the large study where his father dealt with official business and was given a schedule that could be described as insane. Since then, he had to wake up earlier than the chickens, sleep later than the dogs, work harder than the cows, and eat worse than the living conditions. However, Emo Xiaobao was a person with great ambitions, so he knew what it meant by suffering the hardest to rise above others, and what it meant by the heavens bestowing a great responsibility upon him. Thus, after painstakingly training for over a year, Emo Xiaobao, who had just turned 12, and Qin Lai, who was already 15, were thrown into the Qilin to train. Qilin was the most elite member of the Mahist army. Logically speaking, they wouldn't accept someone of Xiaobao's age. Back then, Qin Lai had been rejected because he was too young. But when Emo Xiaobao successfully passed through the swamp forest of Qilin's training, and used all kinds of methods to defeat 7 members of Qilin, he finally opened the door to Qilin. Using the words of Qilin's commander, Qin Feng, third-rate methods, second-rate strength, first-rate results, Emo Xiaobao became the youngest member of Qilin in history. In the eyes of outsiders, Qilin was mysterious, noble, and elegant, but to the people who had become his members, he was actually as kind and amiable as a family. After all, they didn't want to be cold and aloof to people every day. Thus, Emo Xiaobao encountered his first problem after joining Qilin: code names. Every official member of Qilin had to have a code name that they liked and recognized by their comrades. Emo Xiaobao and Qin Lai were assigned to the same group. The group had a total of 8 people. As for the code names, there were all kinds of them. Some were called Snow Wolf, Fierce Tiger, some were called Falcon Crow, and some were called Hammer Iron Hammer. Emo Xiaobao decided to give himself a high-end code name. He was going to be a person whose name would shake the world in the future, so his code name naturally couldn't be vague. Just as Emo Xiaobao was racking his brains over his code name, Qin Lai, who had been waiting impatiently, frowned and said, "Do you still need another code name? Didn't your good fortune already spread throughout the world? No matter how much effort you put in, the code name you came up with cannot be better than the original." Emo Xiaobao blinked. Do I have to be called Crown Prince? That's not good, it feels like I'm showing off my father, right? Qin Lai rolled his eyes and faintly spat out 2 words. Xiaobao. Emo Xiaobao's smile froze and he wanted to pounce over and bite Qin Lai. Qin Lai, you traitor. Qin Lai snorted and said, "Do you think they don't know? How come I didn't know that the Prince Ding Mansion's heir had the habit of burying his head in the sand? Or did someone forget how to loudly proclaim his name in front of the Mahist army?" In the past, little heir Mo's feat of loudly proclaiming, "I am Emo Xiaobao," in front of thousands of soldiers and horses was famous throughout the 3 armies. Since the heir liked this nickname so much, the soldiers of the Mahist army naturally approved of this incomparably cute name, and it was said that it was given by the prince. Although there were people who felt that this name was not good for the heir's tall and mighty image, but after seeing the little heir's delicate smile and cute expression, they couldn't help but agree that His Highness Prince Ding was too wise and far-sighted. It was to the point that many years later, Emo Xiaobao could not help but deeply regret his actions of using his cuteness to trick the heir. Emo Xiaobao looked at his teammates in despair. His teammates smiled in agreement, indicating that Qin Lai's words were true. Originally, Qilin might have been more closed off than other armies, But Qilin's news was definitely not closed off. More importantly, a large portion of the current Qilin had just joined in the past 2 years, and many of them had personally witnessed the little heir's feats. Xiaobao is very good, it suits his image very well. Let's call him Xiaobao. The leader of the group was the first to make the decision. This might be the only chance in his life to mess with the heir, so he had to do it. Although this could very well be the reason why he was continuously enslaved by someone for the rest of his life. Therefore, under the situation of 7-1, Mo Xiaobao was forced to accept the name Xiaobao again with the absolute minority of votes. Because he was temporarily serving Qilin, Qilin's internal members jokingly called him Qilin Xiaobao, Qilin baby. The blow to his name almost made Mo Xiaobao unable to recover. He no longer had the ambition he had when he first joined Qilin. It wasn't that Mo Xiaobao didn't want to do something big, but whenever he thought of hearing countless people call him Xiaobao XX, Xiaobao XXXX, Xiaobao XXXX, he had the urge to hide in the wilderness for the rest of his life. Therefore, after reflecting on the painful experience, Mo Xiaobao finally confirmed that his life was Prince Ding. He wanted to be evil. Be open and aboveboard, be famous for thousands of miles, and be awe-inspiring in the world. He wanted to hide in the dark, be evil, and scheme against people. He wanted the martial arts world to not have his name, but there would definitely be legends about him. He wanted to use his own method to wash away this unglamorous nickname. The consecutive blows finally caused the soft and adorable Mo Xiaobao to turn completely black. Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao, baby Qilin? Whoosh. An arrow pierced through the air and firmly nailed itself between the legs of a certain team commander who was sitting lazily on the ground. It was only 1 centimeter away from a certain sensitive part. A certain young heir with a gloomy expression slowly walked over and calmly pulled out the arrow. My apologies, Commander. The shot was off by a hand. I'll practice 20 more times. A certain commander quietly shrunk his legs and couldn't help but tremble as tears streamed down his face. Damn, you missed by just 1 centimeter. If you didn't miss, where did you want to shoot? Brother Xiaobao. Brother Xiaobao promised to marry me when she grows up. A certain adorable little softie happily rushed into the study. She was so pleased with herself that she even called him by his childhood name. The young man behind the desk coldly glanced at her and didn't say anything. Xer finally agreed to marry me. I'm going to tell my parents. I'm going to prepare the betrothal gift. Little Dumpling danced with joy. Give up. You can't afford to marry my sister even if you sell your whole family. The young man mercilessly attacked. No way. Princess Ding will definitely agree. Humph. Little Dumpling was still happy. Mo Xiaobao, it's wrong to be jealous of your future brother-in-law. Looking at little Dumpling who ran away, the young man looked ferocious. Come on, tell Su Jirui that I don't discriminate against close relatives. I believe that the excellence of the Su family can make up for this small defect. In addition, tell the little princess that it's embarrassing to take a fool out. The next day, the 13-year-old young master of the Leng family was heartbroken because Princess Exa, who was just 4 years old, said that she wanted to marry cousin Jirui more. Xiaobao, can you do me a favor? Young Master Feng San pulled the young master of the Prince Ding mansion with a smile. He looked as if they were close and it would be embarrassing if he didn't help him. A dark light flashed in Mo Xiaobao's calm eyes. What's the matter? Young Master Feng San carefully took out a delicate box and handed it to him. Help me give this to, you know? Why don't you give it to her yourself? Mo Xiaobao opened it and saw a delicate and beautiful phoenix hairpin inside. Young Master Feng San sighed helplessly. She doesn't want to see me. Your father said that I don't do anything important every day and I can't go out of the city this month. Xiaobao, do me a favor. Aren't you going out of the city to visit Mr. Qingyun today? This is for you. Young Master Feng San reluctantly took out a pair of bright pearls and gave it to Mo Xiaobao. After a long time, Mo Xiaobao finally nodded calmly and agreed. Seeing young Master Feng San turn around and leave happily, Mo Xiaobao turned back and threw the pearls to the guard behind him. Send this to Mrs. Yang. Thinking for a while, Mo Xiaobao said, forget it. I'll send it myself. Feng San is so careless. He doesn't even leave a letter. No wonder she doesn't like him. A month later, young Master Feng San went out of the city and asked to see someone. This time he didn't even enter the city, let alone see the person. And young Master Feng San would never know why. Chapter 1109. Yoongu grew up in the mountains with her father. Her mother passed away too early, so she did not have much of an impression of her mother. In her memory there was only a grave full of grass and flowers. Her father often brought her to the grave to talk to her mother. Yoongu thought that her life would continue like that until one day her father passed away. Before her father passed away, he took care of everything. What Yoongu did was to cry and bury her father next to her mother's grave. Then she knew that no one in this world could accompany her forever. His father had even made plans for his future. So Yoongu waited peacefully for the arrival of the person her father said would come to pick her up. But she did not expect that she would wait for 3 years. Although she did not wait for the person her father said would come to pick her up for 3 years, Yoongu was not anxious. She had lived like this for more than 10 years. There was nothing wrong with continuing to live like this in the future. She knew how to hunt, pick herbs, plant herbs, and make all kinds of pills to trade for things she needed. But sometimes, Yoongu began to like climbing up the high cliff to look at the smoke of the village below the mountain. Sometimes, there would be a strange feeling flowing in her heart. Yoongu did not know that it was loneliness. Until one day Yoongu went up the mountain to pick herbs as usual. Then she heard the faint sound of melodious music coming from the mountain. Yoongu knew that it was the sound of a guqin. She also had a guqin. She used to see her father play it often. After her father passed away, no one played it anymore. This person played it very well, even better than her father. Yoongu happily ran towards the source of the sound. He wanted to see what the person playing the guqin looked like. After searching for a long time, Yoongu finally found that the sound of the guqin was coming from behind the cliff. Thus she used her qinggong to climb up the cliff. When she looked down from the cliff, she discovered that there was actually a large house in the valley below. In the house there was a man in white sitting next to a pool of water playing the zither. She played here when she was young. There was no house and no one. She saw that the man was dressed in snow-white clothes. His long black hair was casually tied up behind his back. Although she only saw half of his face, Yoongu swore that he was the most good-looking person she had ever seen. Just like a celestial being from the heavens. After thinking for quite a while, Yoongu slowly made a conclusion about the man in the valley. He was as good-looking as an immortal in the sky. There were several other ugly people in the valley. Those bad guys don't look like the family of the immortals at all. Yoongu thought unhappily as she sat on the cliff and listened to the melodious music. Why would that godlike person hang out with those ugly villains? It would be great if he could play with her. Those bad guys always didn't allow him to do this or that. If it was her, she definitely wouldn't do that. Yoongu squatted on the cliff for 2 whole days, watching the immortal-like man in white sometimes play the zither, sometimes sit by the water and read a book, sometimes do nothing but sit by the water and be lost in thought. Finally finding an opportunity, Yoongu took advantage of the absence of those ugly bad guys and directly jumped down from the cliff to land in front of him. Seeing the young girl descending from the sky, the man in white was not surprised. He only smiled faintly. "You're really good-looking." It was the first time Yoongu saw the man in white's true appearance. Sure enough, he was better looking than she imagined. The man in white smiled faintly and said softly, "You're also very good-looking. Why are you here?" Yoongu didn't know why, but her face felt a little hot. Although she didn't know much about etiquette, it was still rude to praise this man in front of him. Yoongu twisted her fingers and blinked her eyes as she looked at the man in white in front of her. As if he felt the young girl's nervousness and helplessness, the man in white smiled faintly and said softly, "It's very dangerous here. Why did you come here alone?" Dangerous? Yoongu looked around blankly. She had grown up in these mountains and her father had never told her about the dangers. Seeing her blank look, the man in white smiled and said, "That's right. Since you can jump down from such a high cliff, you must have good martial arts. However, there are many dangers in this world that can't be solved with martial arts. It's better for a girl not to run around." "I know. My father also said that. You're really a good person." Yoongu smiled happily. The man in white looked at the young girl with a pure and innocent smile in front of him in surprise. A strange look flashed in his eyes. Yoongu squatted beside him and said unhappily, "I heard you playing the zither, so I wanted to come over and take a look. It's been a long time since someone talked to me. I'll stay for a while and then leave, okay?" The man in white smiled and shook his head. "It's very dangerous here." Yoongu blinked and said, "I know. Those people are bad people, right? I'll help you defeat them, okay?" Oh, it's too dangerous. The man in white softly refused. My martial arts are very good. I can defeat them. Yoon-gu anxiously declared. The man in white still shook his head and said, there are many of them. Even if you defeat them, you can't take me out. Yoon-ji's eyes lit up and said happily, what if I can take you out? The man in white smiled and raised his eyebrows. He glanced at the steep cliff not far away. Yoon-gu hurriedly waved her hand and said, no, I know another way. I played here when I was young. I can definitely get out. Trust me, okay? Looking at the young girl's pleading eyes, the man in white suddenly laughed softly. It was as warm and charming as the return of spring. Yoon-gu could not help but be stunned. When she came back to her senses, she raised her hand and patted her head in annoyance. Why did she feel that this godlike brother in front of her was delicious and wanted to take a bite? It must be because she had not played with others for too long. Okay, I believe you. Then I'll have to trouble you. I'm Su Qingchen. What's your name? The man in white asked with a smile. Su Qingchen? Your name is really nice. I'm Shin Yoon-gu. Yoon-ji's eyes lit up and she said with a smile. Is my name nice? The man in white, the world-famous young master Qingchen, raised his handsome eyebrows and smiled indifferently. Yoon-gu took out a pill from her bosom and motioned for Su Qingchen to take it. Although he did not know how the young girl in front of him planned to take him out, young Master Qingchen, for the first time in his life, gave his comfort to a young girl who seemed innocent. After taking the pill, his vision turned black and he quickly fell into darkness. When he finally felt a trace of strange coldness, young Master Qingchen felt that he did not regret it. Perhaps it was because of the young girl's clear and bright eyes. For the first time, young Master Qingchen willfully gave his life to a person he had just met. When he woke up again, young Master Qingchen could not help but smile bitterly. As a person, one should not be too willful and take risks. At least, he should ask the young girl how she planned to take him out. Chapter 11:10. Not only was he uncomfortably wet, the pain coming from his chest and shoulders made him unable to move more than half of his body. The eldest young master of the Su family, who had always been known as the immortal young master, was in such a sorry state for the first time in his life. Su Qingchen, are you all right? A somewhat unfamiliar voice came from behind. Su Qingchen turned his head with some difficulty and saw a similarly wet little girl looking at him with a face full of shame. Her bright and beautiful big eyes were full of sparkling tears. Su Qingchen coughed lightly, shook his head and forced a smile. I'm fine, we're out. You brought me out from the bottom of that pool? I'm sorry. I was too careless and caused you to be injured. Yoon-gu looked at Su Qingchen anxiously and said guiltily. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and shook his head. This little girl had a petite figure. Su Qingchen could imagine how much effort it took to bring out an adult man who was much taller than her from the bottom of the pool. Compared to that, this little bit of carelessness was really not worth mentioning. But it was really painful. Young Master Qingchen was not a martial artist and rarely got injured in his life. This kind of serious injury was the first time in his life. He could not help but pale from the pain. Seeing him in so much pain, Yoon-gu could not help but pale with fright. She quickly took out a small medicine bottle and poured a pill into his mouth. Don't be afraid. I will cure you. Soon it will be different. After saying that, she did not care about Su Qingchen's expression and directly picked up young Master Qingchen, who was taller than her, and ran in the direction of her home. It was the first time in his life that he had enjoyed such treatment. Even the calm and composed young Master Qingchen could not help but twitch his face. But the pain from his body clearly reminded him that unless he planned to lie here forever, he could only accept the current situation. Yoon-ji's home was located in a hidden valley in the mountains. Su Qingchen had only taken a brief look at the entrance of the valley when she entered, and she knew that there was a rather brilliant formation set up at the entrance of the valley. It was basically difficult for people who were not proficient in formations to find this place. When young Master Qingchen found out that the little girl had been living alone in the valley since her father passed away 3 years ago, he could not help but sigh softly in his heart when he saw the little girl looking at him happily with sparkling eyes. Young Master Qingchen had seen countless people in his life, but this was the first time he had seen such an innocent little girl. It was hard to understand why Yoon-ji's father would leave his innocent and young daughter alone in the deep mountains. Although Yoon-ji's martial arts were not weak, martial arts could not determine everything in this world. Compared to the high ground of martial arts, the viciousness of the human heart was far more dangerous. Yoongu was a very simple girl. She was like a chick that had just hatched, instinctively trusting the first person she saw. After her father passed away, young Master Qingchen was the first person who had a close relationship with Yoongu. Therefore, young Master Qingchen naturally became Yoonji's most trusted person. Hence, after finding out about Yoonji's father's arrangements, Sir Qingchen had effortlessly persuaded the young lady to leave the valley with him. After confirming that the Mu family had no intention of taking care of Yoongu, he naturally brought the young lady back to Glass City. Su Qingchen. The bustling Glass City made Yoongu somewhat uncomfortable. Her beautiful little face was filled with uneasiness and worry. And the Su residence that was already in sight made her stop in her tracks. Although Su Qingchen said that the Su family would be her home in the future, no matter how ignorant Yoongu was, she still understood that the Su family was Su Qingchen's home and not her own home. She no longer had a home. Don't be afraid. Everyone in our family is very good. They will all like you. Just like Leah. Don't you like her very much? Young Master Qingchen comforted her softly. Sister Leah? Speaking of Sister Leah, Yoonji's eyes could not help but brighten. Sister Leah was her first good friend other than Su Qingchen. Moreover, Sister Leah was very beautiful and gentle. On the way up north, she had heard many people say that Sister Leah was the most amazing woman in the world. Not only was she beautiful, her martial arts were good and she could even lead troops to war. It was a pity that Sister Leah had gone to war. She could not follow and cause trouble. Su Qingchen nodded and smiled. Yes, Leah is my cousin. We are all family. Could it be that Yoongu does not like the Su residence? Then you can also live in the Prince Ding mansion. However, there is no one in the Prince Ding mansion now. Yoongu lives alone. No, I will live in the Su residence. Yoongu hurriedly shook her head. Young Master Qingchen's lips curled into a faint smile. That's good. Go. Everyone is already here to welcome us. Young Master Qingchen had returned from his tribulation and brought back a beautiful lady. The Su family who had received the news long ago turned out in full force to welcome them at the door. Seeing the two of them appear, almost everyone's eyes were attracted to the beautiful lady in yellow next to young Master Qingchen. Madame Su repeatedly praised them. She happily went forward and carefully sized up Yoongu. She smiled and asked, "Young lady, are you Yoongu? You must have had a tough journey." Yoongu was a little embarrassed to be held by the gentle and noble lady in front of her. However, she still nodded and said, "Yes, I am Shin Yoongu. This is my mother and second aunt." Yoongu can call them aunts, Su Qingchen said with a faint smile. "Hello, aunts," Brother Yoon said softly. Good child." Madame Su nodded repeatedly. She looked at the young lady in front of her with satisfaction. This was the first time her son had personally brought a lady home. Moreover, she could tell at a glance that this was a good and obedient lady. Even her niece's letter had repeatedly praised her. Madame Su trusted Yi Li's judgment. Seeing Yoonji's blushing and helpless appearance, Qin Jing covered her mouth and smiled. "Aunt's mother, let's go in first. Sister Yoongu must be tired from the journey." "Sister Yoongu, my name is Qin Jing. You can call me Sister Jing. Did Li mention me?" Yoongu hurriedly nodded. Sister Li said that Sister Jing is a good person. "Thank you, Sister Jing. Yoongu is not tired. My martial arts are very good." Seeing the young lady's honest appearance, everyone could not help but laugh in unison. Second, Madame Su pursed her lips and smiled. "All right, Jinger is right. Let's go in first. Yoongu, just treat the Su family as your own home in the future." Madame Su nodded and said, "Your second aunt is right. Just treat this as your own home in the future. Let's go in and rest." My own words. Yoonji's heart softened. Looking at the smiling people in front of her, she could not help but blink, feeling a little jealous. "Yoongu, let's go in." Qin Jing held Yoonji's hand and smiled softly. "Yes, thank you, Sister Jing." Yoongu nodded heavily. Su Qingchen's family was as good as Sister Li. Following Su Qingchen all the way to the north, her uneasy heart finally relaxed. Yoongu could not help but give Qin Jing a bright smile. Chapter 11:11. The days of living in the Su family were both happy and uneasy for Yoongu. Everyone in the Su family was very easy to get along with. This was a novel and interesting experience for Yoongu, who had only been accompanied by her father since she was a child. The two madams of the Su family and Sister Qingjing were very concerned about her. Although she needed to learn a lot of things that she had never known, which made her a little depressed that she was so stupid, the two aunts of the Su family and Sister Qingjing were not angry and often comforted her. What really made Yungu depressed was that she felt a little afraid of Su Qingchen along the way. Because most of the people in the Su family were afraid of him. Moreover, Su Qingchen was really fierce. Even if Su Qingchen was sick and weak and she was a healthy person with strong martial arts, she was still afraid of Su Qingchen. Yungu. In the study, Yungu was trying hard to trace the calligraphy left by young Master Qingchen. Hearing Qingjing's voice, she raised her head and touched her little face. A black ink stain immediately stained the originally white and beautiful little face, but the owner of the little face was at a loss. Qingjing stood at the door and looked at the girl sitting behind the desk in a daze. She could not help but cover her mouth and smile. Yungu, what are you doing? Yungu pursed her little mouth and said with some grievance, I'm practicing calligraphy. Qingjing walked forward and looked at Yunji's handwriting. She smiled and said, Yunji's calligraphy has improved. It's very good. Why are you still practicing? Qingjing was born in a scholarly family and was once a famous talented woman in the Chu capital. For her to say that Yunji's calligraphy was very good, it could be seen that Yunji's calligraphy was indeed good. Yungu whispered. Su Qingchen said that practicing calligraphy can hone one's temperament. Her big pitiful eyes blinked at Qingjing and almost engraved the words I don't want to write on her face. Looking at Yunji's pitiful appearance, Qingjing could only sigh helplessly. Although Yungu was occasionally a little naughty, she was also well-behaved and pitiful. Even Madame Su could not bear to see her being so stubborn about young Master Qingchen's words. However, no matter how much Yungu disliked young Master Qingchen's orders, as long as young Master Qingchen gave the order, Yungu would do it without any hesitation. Qingjing smiled and wiped the ink stains on Yunji's face with a handkerchief. She smiled faintly and said, Yungu is very good. Why do you have to stay in the room every day to hone your temperament? I'm going to look for Ting-er and Tianxiang to go shopping together. Yungu, do you want to come along? Seeing the ink on Qingjing's snow-white handkerchief, Yungu knew that she had made a fool of herself. She quickly took the handkerchief from Qingjing's hand and wiped it herself. Hearing Qingjing's words, Yungu was also very moved, but looking at the half-written words on the table, her delicate little face could not help but fall. If Su Qingchen knew that she ran out halfway, he would definitely punish her twice the amount of gratitude. Her fingers would be broken. Alright, let's go. Sister Jing'er will help you talk to Big Brother, okay? Big Brother will always be reasonable. How can a little girl sit at home every day without moving? Qingjing smiled and pulled Yungu out. Sister-in-law, where are you going? Just as they left the study room, they bumped into young Master Qingchen. He clearly had a smile that made people feel like they were bathed in the spring breeze, but in Yunji's eyes she was like a mouse that saw a cat and quickly hid behind Qingjing. Seeing this situation, although the smile on Su Qingchen's face did not change, his eyes darkened slightly. Qingjing did not feel that there was anything wrong with the atmosphere between the two at all. She smiled generously and said, Big Brother, I was just about to look for you. Ting-er, Tianxiang and I want to go out for a walk together with Wu Yu. Coincidentally, we also brought Yungu out. She stayed in the residence all day and did not go anywhere. Look at her little face, it's a little haggard. Actually, Yungu was not haggard, but after Qingjing said this, Su Qingchen also felt that Yunji's smile did not seem to be as bright and beautiful as before she came to Glass City. When she saw him, she also seemed to be avoiding him. Actually, young Master Qingchen was also very wronged. When he was recuperating in the valley, he got along very well with Yungu and Yungu was also very close to him. But after coming out, Yungu became a little afraid of him for no reason. Young Master Qingchen was extremely wise, but he did not understand what he had done to make the little girl so afraid of him. Young Master Qingchen's charm that always succeeded seemed to have lost its effect. No matter how he treated Yungu, she always looked like she was obedient to him. After a moment of silence, Su Qingchen glanced at Yunji's big yearning eyes that quietly appeared behind Qingjing. He sighed helplessly in his heart and said, You can't go out today. Yunji's originally bright eyes suddenly dimmed. Su Qingchen continued, Xinyang, Mr. Xinyang is here and wants to see you. Mr. Xinyang? Yungu blinked and quickly reacted. Is it that godly Dr. Xinyang? Yun-gu studied medicine and naturally paid special attention to Shenyang, this world-famous godly doctor. Although she knew that Shenyang was in Glass City, ever since she came to the Su family she had been helping to learn all kinds of etiquette and knowledge. Afterwards, Su Qingchen arranged all kinds of homework for her. She simply did not have the time to sneak out to visit Shenyang. Su Qingchen nodded and asked, "Does Yun-gu want to see him?" "Of course I want to see him. Why would Mr. Shin personally come to see me?" Yun-gu hurriedly asked. At the same time she was somewhat excited and puzzled. Shenyang was the world-famous godly doctor, the #1 doctor of the Prince Ding mansion. She was only an unknown little girl. How did Shenyang know of her? Su Qingchen nodded and said, "Since that is the case, let's go to the reception hall. Princess Changle has also come." In the reception hall, Shenyang was sitting and drinking tea. However, the angry expression on his face did not seem like he had come to pay a visit. Grand Madame Su sat to the side accompanying him, a faint helplessness on her face. Although Shenyang was only a doctor of the Prince Ding mansion, he had saved Prince Ding's life. Within the Prince Ding mansion and the Mahist army he was rather famous. Just based on his godly medical skills, the Su family could not be disrespectful. Moreover, this time the Su family had indeed acted inappropriately. "Teacher, don't scare Yun-gu." Mo Wuyo, who was sitting next to Shenyang, covered her mouth and smiled faintly. She had seen Yun-gu several times and was very fond of that adorable girl. It was just that she did not expect Yun-gu to have a relationship with her teacher. Shenyang lightly snorted, muttering in a low voice about a girl's appearance. Mo Wuyo's pretty face immediately turned crimson, not daring to persuade him any further. "And Su, has godly Dr. Shin really come?" Yun-gu had just arrived at the door when her voice traveled in. Grand Madame Su smiled and beckoned to her, saying, "Yun-gu, quickly come over. This is Shenyang, godly Dr. Shin. Quickly come and greet him." Yun-gu stepped forward and properly saluted. "Yun-gu greets godly Dr. Shin." Shenyang lowered his eyes and glanced at Yun-gu, a trace of warmth flashing through his eyes. Only then did he nod and say, "You have learned the rules well." Hearing this, Yun-gu somewhat shyly lowered her head and said, "It was all taught by Aunt Su and Sister Jing." Originally she had felt somewhat bored while learning etiquette. However, now that Shenyang had praised her, she suddenly felt that all the hard work had been worth it. She did not know why, but when she saw godly Dr. Shin, who seemed to have a bad temper, she felt particularly close. She attributed this to her admiration for Shenyang. Chapter 11-12. Madame Su pulled Yun-gu to her with a smile and said, "Yun-gu is a smart and well-behaved child." Madame Su really liked Yun-gu when she said this. Not only because Yun-gu was brought back by her son, but also because of Yun-ji's temperament. Madame Su family, who had no daughter, really loved her. Although she had a niece like Yi Li's temperament was calm and quiet. She was one of the most extraordinary women in the world. Therefore, there were very few things that Madame Su could care for and help her with. Moreover, Yun-gu was so innocent and clueless about the world, which made Madame Su even more worried and distressed. While talking, Su Qingchen and Qingjing also followed. Seeing Su Qingchen, Shenyang's face, which had eased a little, turned ugly again. He snorted and said nothing with a cold face. Su Qingchen was not offended. He smiled faintly and said, "Yun-gu, have you met Mr. Shin?" Yun-gu looked at Shenyang, who was suddenly angry, and then at Su Qingchen, who was smiling. She nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, Mr. Shin praised me." Su Qingchen smiled and said warmly, "Is that so? Mr. Shin rarely praises people. But Yun-gu can't be proud." Yun-gu nodded repeatedly, but her pair of bright eyes had already been glued to Shenyang. Since her father passed away, there was no one to guide her medical skills. If she had doubts, she could only explore slowly by herself. She had not made any progress for a long time. Thinking of this, Yun-gu looked at Shenyang with more enthusiasm. Seeing Yun-gu looking at Shenyang with undisguised admiration, Su Qingchen's expression darkened slightly. He looked at Shenyang and said, "Mr. Shin, what do you have to say? Yun-gu is here now, so feel free to speak." Shenyang snorted softly, but looked at Yun-gu with a gentle gaze. Although he respected the Su family, it did not mean that he could understand the fact that the Su family hid Yun-ji's identity from him. In any case, Yun-gu was a member of the Shin family. "Yun-gu, come here. This is for you. It's my meeting gift." Yang took out a simple jade box and handed it over. Yungu could not help but look at Su Qingchen. Seeing him nod, she walked over and took the box in Yang's hand, but Yang's face darkened again. Yungu curiously opened the box and saw a set of silver needles neatly placed inside. Yunji's little face lit up and she hesitated for a moment before saying, This is the hibiscus needle that Daddy talked about. Yang nodded and said with a smile, That's right, it's the hibiscus needle. I don't need it now. Since you're also a medical student, I'll give it to you. To ordinary people, this hibiscus was nothing more than a silver needle. However, to a doctor it was a rare treasure. Yungu was naturally overjoyed, but he was also a little uneasy. Yungu can't accept it. Yang raised his eyebrows and asked, Why not? Yungu bit the corner of her lips and said, Father said that it wasn't easy to create the hibiscus needle. This is the only set left in the world. Yunj can't accept such a valuable gift from Mr. Shin. Yang looked at Yungu and smiled thoughtfully. Yungu, I heard that your medical skills are pretty good. Yungu blushed slightly. Yunji's medical skills have not improved for a long time. Do you think I can give you some pointers? Yang smiled. Since Yang had made it so clear, how could Yungu not understand? She said happily, Mr. Shin, are you willing to take me as your disciple? Yang shook his head. Seeing Yunji's disappointed eyes, he smiled and said, My surname is Shin, so is yours. I'm old now, but I don't have any children. Are you willing to take me as your godfather? Godfather? Yungu was stunned. Yang took it as her agreement and smiled with satisfaction. Good girl, this is a gift from your godfather. Keep it well. He raised his hand and put the jade box with the silver needles into Yunji's hands. But Yungu was at a loss. Did she agree? Mr. Shin, isn't this? Mrs. Su frowned and said. Yungu didn't know, but they knew the relationship between Yang and Yungu. In terms of seniority, Yang was already Yunji's granduncle. How could he take her as his goddaughter? Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment. He smiled and said, Yungu, you're a medical student. It's fate that you have the same surname as Mr. Shin. Are you willing to be Mr. Shin's goddaughter? Yungu looked up at Yang, who was looking at her lovingly. She whispered, If I take Mr. Shin as my godfather, will Mr. Shin dote on me as much as my father? Yang nodded and smiled. Of course. I'll teach you everything I've learned in my life. And Wuyo, although she's 2 months younger than you, she joined first. It's up to you to call her whatever you want. You're about the same age. You can learn and play together in the future. You can be companions. Senior Sister Wuyo. Sister Yungu. Yungu and Wuyo said in unison. Before their voices died away, they couldn't help but laugh. Godfather. Yungu called. Good girl. Yang's eyes were slightly red. He looked at Yungu and nodded. He was unmarried and had no children. His nephew, whom he had high hopes for, had gone far away for his wife. Now Yungu was the only bloodline left in the Shin family. Congratulations, Mr. Shin, for taking in such a well-behaved daughter. Madame Su smiled. Although the confusion in seniority gave Madame Su a headache. However, since Yang didn't mind and her son agreed, she didn't have any objections. Yunji's parents had nothing to do with Yungu. Yang didn't want to mention it for Yunji's sake. Yang nodded. He glanced at Su Qingchen and said calmly, Thank you, Madame Su. In that case, I have something to discuss with Madame Su. Madame Su was stunned. She smiled and said, Mr. Shin, feel free to speak. You don't have to be so polite. Yang said, Since Yungu has taken me as her godfather, she's also my Shin family's daughter. I'll take Yungu back to the mansion in the next 2 days. Thank you for taking care of her for this period of time. Although Yang spent most of his time in the Prince Ding mansion, he also had his own mansion in Glass City. Hearing Yang's words, Madame Su was only stunned for a moment. Su Qingchen, who was sitting below, immediately looked embarrassed. Chapter 11:13. Yang suddenly proposed to take Yungu away. For a moment, everyone in the Su family couldn't accept it. Although Yungu hadn't been in the Su family for a long time, the Su family really liked this lively, simple and lovely girl. Mrs. Su, who didn't have a daughter, treated Yungu better than her sons. On the other hand, Mrs. Su still secretly hoped that this little girl would become the daughter-in-law of the Su family. Now that Yoon-gu suddenly wanted to leave, how could Mrs. Su not be sad? However, Shin-young was Yoon-ji's blood relative. Even if he had become Yoon-ji's adoptive father now, their relationship was much closer than that of the Su family. Shin-young said that he wanted to take Yoon-gu away. Even the Su family couldn't find a reason to refuse. Suppressing the anxiety in her heart, Mrs. Su looked at her son sitting in the lower seat. She hoped that he could come up with a reasonable excuse to refuse Shin-young. Su Qingchen looked up at Shin-young. The expression on his face had returned to its usual gentleness. He smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Shin, you have been very busy these months. How can you have time to take care of Yoon-gu? If Yoon-gu lives in your mansion, isn't it the same as when she lived in the mountains? How could living in his mansion be the same as living in the mountains?" Shin-young was displeased and wanted to refute. Before he spoke, Su Qingchen continued, "What's more, even if you're not busy, there isn't even a woman in your mansion. If Yoon-gu comes to your mansion, there will be no one to accompany or teach her." Mrs. Su's eyes lit up. She quickly smiled and said, "That's right, Mr. Shin. You know that Yoon-gu used to live with her father, and there was no one to teach her many things that a girl should learn. If Mr. Shin's surname is better than mine, give Yoon-gu to me. I promise that I will teach Yoon-gu to be the most educated and well-behaved girl." Well, Shin-young frowned. It didn't matter whether Yoon-gu could become a well-behaved girl or not, but Mrs. Su was right. She had to learn the rules of many girls more or less. He couldn't take care of Yoon-gu for a lifetime. She had to get married in the future. It was fine to spoil her when she was a girl, and it didn't matter whether she knew how to do it or not. But in the future, when she married into her husband's family, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape her mother-in-law's love even if she didn't know anything. Seeing Shin-young hesitate, Qin Jing hurriedly smiled and said, "Aunt is right. Mr. Shin-young is serious in her studies. I believe it won't be long before she can make up for all her shortcomings." Before she finished learning Young, she was still living in our house and learned more from eldest aunt. "If Mr. Shin wants to guide Young in her medical skills, why don't you go to the pharmacy or your residence during the day just like Wuyeo?" Shin-young looked hesitantly at Yoon-gu, who was standing at the side. He frowned and pondered. He was quite busy these days. There was a war going on outside. Although he didn't need to go to the front line, he still needed to prepare the medicinal herbs to be transported to the front line. "If that's the case. Thank you, Madam Su." Shin-young couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He had angrily rushed into someone else's house, but in the end he still had to trouble them. Madam Su didn't care at all. She smiled and said, "Young is very obedient. Everyone in our family is very busy. Sister-in-law and Jing are often accompany her, but I'm all alone. I'm happy to have Young as my companion." Yoon-gu stood at the side and blinked. She looked at Shin-young. Was she still going to live in the Su family? In fact, she quite liked the Su family. Everyone in the Su family was very good. She couldn't bear to part with them. Does Young want to live with Mr. Shin? Young Master Qingchen looked at Yoon-gu with a faint smile and said softly, "When you pass your studies, you can go back with Mr. Shin. Before that, Young has to study hard and don't let Mr. Shin down." Yoon-gu shrunk her neck. She only felt a cold wind blowing above her head. Her bright and beautiful eyes suddenly dimmed. Her face, which was originally full of smiles, looked like she had eaten coptis. Her small head shook vigorously and nodded. "Ooh, Godfather Su Qingchen is so scary." Unfortunately, Shin-young only treated her as his new goddaughter. His only blood relative in this world was indeed raised astray by her father and didn't like to study. He didn't receive Yoon-ji's cry for help at all. After sending Shin-young off, Yoon-gu once again ushered in a new learning climax. Every day, other than the half-day appointment with Shin-young to study medicine, Yoon-gu spent most of her time going to the study and on the way to the study. Moreover, ever since Shin-young brought his goddaughter to Glass City, more and more talented young men and women came to Shin-yang's clinic with various excuses or happened to bump into him on the way. It couldn't be helped. Shin-yang's two female disciples not only had good medical skills, but they were also as beautiful as flowers. Unfortunately, Mo Wuyeo was already betrothed to the fourth young master of the Su family. There was no hope for this eldest disciple, but this youngest disciple and goddaughter could still be relied on. Thus, Yoon-gu tragically found that she always had endless homework to do. Every time she felt that she had learned well and could be free, she would be ashamed to find that she was so stupid that she couldn't be seen in front of Su Qingchen the next day. She had to continue to study hard. Then she would return to the study with more books and homework. Even eldest Madame Su couldn't stand young Master Qingchen's attitude of wanting to teach others. After Yungu rejected her suggestion to take her out for a walk for the 5th time with a face full of longing and refusal, eldest Madame Su finally couldn't help but talk to her son. Yungu is a girl. She doesn't need to take the imperial examination. Why are you pushing her so hard? Eldest Madame Su sighed when she saw her son's calm appearance. Young Master Qingchen said sternly, other girls don't need to take the imperial examination. Didn't they also learn from a young age? Yungu is more than 10 years late. Naturally she has to be more attentive. I don't mind if my daughter-in-law isn't a talented girl. Eldest Madame Su couldn't help but say silently in her heart. Mother, Yungu hasn't met any outsiders since she was young. But she's also very active. If she's deceived by others, how are you going to explain it to Mr. Shen? Didn't you hear Weo say that people have been looking for Yungu recently? There's no need to be afraid since Mr. Shen is in charge of the clinic. What if she runs out to play by herself? Is that so? Eldest Madame Su was also a little nervous. Young Master Qingchen nodded and said, of course that's why I'm doing this. When Yungu learns more and understands more, she'll naturally be more relaxed. Since Mr. Shen entrusted Yungu to us, we should enjoy ourselves to the fullest, right? Eldest Madame Su frowned and nodded while thinking. She didn't notice that she had been led out of the study by Su Qingchen. After taking a few more steps forward, eldest Madame Su stopped. She turned back and said angrily, damn boy, Weo won't tell you this. Yungu is so obedient. How could she? At the door, young Master Qingchen's figure had disappeared without a trace. Knowing that no one could change her son's mind, eldest Madame Su could only sigh and shake her head helplessly. She'd better go and see Yungu and stew some tonic for her. Poor child. But Yungu was also obedient. If she didn't want to learn, she could just beat Su Qingchen up. At least Su Qingchen couldn't beat her, right? Eldest Madame Su was a little absent-minded. Chapter 11-14. Thus, Yunji's painstaking study continued until Prince Ding and Princess Consort returned in triumph. Yungu heaved a sigh of relief, and her respect for young Master Qingchen increased. In the past, if someone had asked Yungu what kind of person young Master Qingchen was, Yungu would have said that young Master Qingchen was the most handsome, powerful and intelligent person in the world. But now, if someone had asked her what kind of person young Master Qingchen was, Yunji's answer would be that young Master Qingchen was the most handsome, powerful and responsible teacher in the world. Prince Ding and Princess Ding returned in triumph and the world was at peace. After years of war, the people had obtained temporary peace. The entire glass city was bustling with noise and excitement. A few days after the birthday banquet of the little heir and princess of the Prince Ding mansion, it was time for the wedding banquet of the 3rd and 4th young masters of the Su family. The guests who came to Glass City for the birthday banquet had not left yet, so they naturally joined in the fun and attended the Su family's wedding banquet. At the wedding banquet, as the elder brother of the 2 grooms, no matter how otherworldly young Master Qingchen was, he could not avoid the fate of being dragged by the guests to drink. During this period, many people did not forget to participate in other activities. Why don't I see young Master Su's wife? A prince of a small country in the western region asked in a somewhat stiff Central Plains dialect. Su Qingchen, who was toasting, glanced at the princess of the western region, who was sitting below the prince and staring at him. His eyes darkened slightly as he smiled and said, I am not married yet. The prince of the western region's eyes lit up. That's great. What do you think of my younger sister, Prime Minister Su? She is the most beautiful and virtuous lady in our country. The princess of the western region was open-minded, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. She looked eagerly at the handsome man in front of her. Young Master Qingchen was startled. He smiled and shook his head to decline. I'm afraid I will have to disappoint you. The prince of the western region did not understand. Why? Young Master Qingchen was unmarried and his younger sister was unmarried. Both of them were of similar status and appearance, so why would he not agree? Young Master Qingchen was about to speak when he caught a glimpse of a delicate figure walking by and turned to the corridor in front. Of course, she did not miss a certain handsome young master who was following behind her. Young Master Qingchen's eyes darkened. He smiled faintly and said, Sorry, I already have a fiancé, That's impossible. I've never heard of her. The princess of the western region shouted in disbelief. Who is she? I want to challenge her. I just walked over. Young Master Qingshan smiled. If it was someone else, they might not know who young Master Qingshan was talking about. However, the princess of the western region was sitting in the direction where Yungu had gone. What was more, she happened to know Yungu. The princess of the western region looked at young Master Qingshan in surprise. No. Even if she's prettier than me, she's still a child. Why would you like her? She's not 13 yet. Young Master Qingshan was speechless. Yungu was almost 17 years old. However, the people of the western regions naturally thought that Yungu was still young. Moreover, Yungu was lively and loved to laugh. In the eyes of the western region's princess, she was still a child. I absolutely cannot lose to a child. I want to challenge her. The princess of the western regions did not attend the banquet. She immediately stood up and chased after Yungu. The prince of the western region was afraid that his sister would cause trouble, so he hurriedly got up and chased after her. Young Master Qingshan patted his shoulder and said, Prince, please take a seat. I'll go down and take a look. The prince of the western region thought for a while and nodded. All right. You're the one who caused this trouble. You should settle it yourself. He really did not force him to marry his sister. He was just casually asking. Young Master Qingshan smiled and nodded. He also slowly followed. The entire Su residence was bustling. The guests were also toasting and exchanging toasts. Not many people noticed that young Master Qingshan had quietly left. Miss Shen, Yungu glared at the person following behind her irritably. She decided to use her qinggong to leave this place. This person always followed her every time she met him. When she stopped to ask him what was going on, he would not tell her. Once she left, he would follow her. She planned to go to the bridal chamber to see Wuyo and Sister Tianxiang. Why was this guy following her? Miss Shen, what are you trying to say? Yungu said unhappily. Su Qingshan said that she could not let people call her name all the time. That was not good. Su Qingshan said that there was a man she did not know who kept following her and calling her a bad person. He should just beat him up. However, this guy did not seem to be a bad person. A few days ago, she saw him helping an old man up after being knocked down. To beat or not to beat? Miss Mission. Seeing the beautiful and charming girl under the moonlight, the handsome man could not help but blush. He was somewhat at a loss. Miss Shin, I have something to say to you. I know. You've been following me for a few days. Have you finally remembered what you want to say? Hurry up and say it. Don't call me again. Otherwise I'll really beat you. Yungu nodded. The man was stunned. He laughed dryly and said, Miss Shin really likes to joke. Such a delicate girl, even if she beat him it would not hurt, right? In order to reassure the beauty. If Miss Shin wants to beat me, then do it. I won't hide. The man said righteously. This time it was Yunji's turn to be dumbfounded. You'd better hurry up and say what you want to say. If you're done, I'll be leaving. I'm busy. The man hurriedly nodded and said happily, Miss Shin, I want to say, my surname is Mei Changshi. I'm 18 this year. My father is a prefect of a state. That's not important. I'm studying at Lishan Academy. I just finished my military service last year. Although I can't be said to be proficient in both literature and martial arts, I'm definitely not a weak scholar. I will definitely be able to protect you. My family. Although she felt that it was impolite to interrupt him, Yungu could not help but say, what do you want to say? Did she need his protection? She could send him flying with a slap. Furthermore, she did not know him. The man was stunned. He finally realized that he had not gotten to the point after talking for so long. Gritting his teeth, the man said firmly, Miss Shin, what I want to say is, to you Yungu, what are you doing here? A clear voice sounded from not far away. Under the moonlight, a man in white walked over slowly. With a faint smile, his handsome face seemed to be covered with a layer of halo under the moonlight. People could not help but look away. But the man surnamed Mei, who was standing beside Yungu, suddenly felt a gust of cold wind and sneezed on the spot. What are you doing here? Walking to Yunji's side, young Master Qingshan smiled and raised his hand to stroke Yunji's hair that was blown to the front by the night wind. Yungu blinked. Where should I go if not to the bridal chamber? It's too dark. Be careful not to fall. Young Master Qingshan smiled faintly. Why was Su Qingchen so strange? How could she fall? Why did she feel so redundant? Young Master Mei thought gloomily. Young Master Qingchen, you and Miss Shen know each other? Yungu, I finally found you. I want to duel with you. If I win, young Master Qingchen will be mine. Not far away, the princess of the western region saw the three people and her eyes lit up. She quickly rushed over. Chapter 11:15. The princess of the western region rushed to the three of them and was surprised to see that Su Qingchen was also there. Young Master Qingchen, why are you here? The Su residence was not big, but it was not small either. It was obvious that the princess of the western region had lost her way in the garden and allowed young Master Qingchen to catch up with Yungu first. Su Qingchen smiled but did not speak. Yungu was at a loss. That, Princess, why do you want to challenge me? What does this have to do with Su Qingchen? She did not have a strong opinion about winning or losing. If the princess of the western region wanted to win so badly, she would just admit defeat. But what did she mean by Su Qingchen would belong to her if she won? Although Yungu was at a loss, looking at young Master Qingchen's smiling face, her intuition told her that she could not accept or admit defeat so easily. The princess of the western region was a little unhappy. She felt that Yungu was deliberately playing dumb and refused to accept her challenge. She pouted and said, "Aren't you young Master Qingchen's fiancé? I like young Master Qingchen. I want to challenge you. If you lose, you have to give young Master Qingchen to me." What? Young Master Mei was shocked. Miss Shen was actually young Master Qingchen's fiancé. Why did he not know such big news? He actually wanted to propose to young Master Qingchen's fiancé. Looking at young Master Qingchen, who was smiling like a spring breeze, and then looking at himself, young Master Mei could not help but cry in his heart. What? Yungu blinked with a blank face. When did she become Su Qingchen's fiancé? No. She did not want to be Su Qingchen's fiancé. It was already very pitiful to be under his control now. If she became his fiancé, would she not be buried in the Book Mountain for the rest of her life? Yungu shook her head bitterly. She really did not like to study. Yungu was about to say that she admitted defeat when a hand gently rested on her shoulder from behind. Yungu turned around and met young Master Qingchen's smiling eyes. But Yungu could clearly see the threat in his eyes. Do you want to copy books again? Of course, Yungu did not want to copy books, so she could only submit to young Master Qingchen's abuse of power. Yungu looked at the princess of the western region with some grievance. What do you want to compete in? The sky was a little dark, so the princess of the western region couldn't see the expression on Yunji's face clearly. He thought for a moment and said, "Let's compete in martial arts." People in the western regions revered martial arts, but it seemed that no woman in the Central Plains knew martial arts except for Princess Ding. The princess of the western region looked at the handsome young Master Qingchen who was standing behind Yungu. Her heart was filled with confidence. "Yunj, you're not allowed to lose." Young Master Qingchen chuckled softly. Yungu trembled and nodded sadly at the princess of the western region. The princess of the western region was naturally not Yunji's opponent. Although Yungu was young, her martial arts were among the top in the entire Glass City. However, she was beautiful and had a lively and cute personality. She was also taken care of by Xinyang and the Su family, so there was basically no chance for her to make a move. Therefore, even in Glass City, only a handful of people knew that she knew martial arts. Thus, under young Master Mei's shocked gaze, the princess of the western region was sent flying by Yungu in just a few moves. Seeing Yunji's skills, young Master Mei's face was filled with shame. He had just boasted shamelessly that he would protect Miss Shen. The princess of the western region was also a forthright woman. She admired Su Qingchen and directly challenged Yungu. She was not angry even when she lost. She stood up and patted the dust off her body. She waved at Yungu and left. She did not even look at young Master Qingchen. The garden quieted down again. Young Master Mei looked at Su Qingchen and Yungu, who were standing in front of him, without saying a word. He touched his nose awkwardly and quietly left. Yungu looked at Su Qingchen in a daze. She was not someone who was good at changing her mind. The sudden appearance of a fiancé made her feel awkward and helpless. That, Su Qingchen, I'm going to see Wuyo and Sister Tianxiang first. Also don't talk nonsense. I'm not your fiancé. After she finished speaking, she did not care about Su Qingshan's reaction. She directly used her qinggong to sweep past the flowers and trees in the garden and hurried in the direction of Hua Tianxiang's bridal chamber. She looked as if she was afraid that someone would chase after her. Young Master Qingshan looked helplessly at the figure that disappeared into the distance. He sighed softly. Just as he was about to turn and leave, a muffled laugh came from the roof behind him. Young Master Qingshan turned around and saw Prince Ding, who had disappeared not long after the banquet started. He was sitting lazily on the roof with Princess Ding in his arms and looking down with a smile. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's gloating expression, he knew that a certain someone must have seen everything from the beginning to the end. When did Prince Ding start to peek at other people's private matters? Su Qingshan said unhappily. Mo Xiaoyao laughed heartily. He held Yi Li's waist with one hand and floated down from the roof. He looked at young Master Qingshan with a smile and said, "I have always liked to laugh at others." Didn't young Master Qingshan already know? Yi Li smiled apologetically at Su Qingshan and said softly, "Big brother, did you scare Yungu?" Yi Li had secretly tested Yungu several times. That little girl was raised by her father in the mountains and had little contact with others. As a result, her mind matured much later than the average girl. She could not think of love at all. At first, she thought that Su Qingshan was good-looking and wanted someone to accompany her, so she took the risk to save him. Later, she found that Su Qingshan was a good teacher and she was a stupid student. So now the student was afraid of the teacher like a mouse seeing a cat. If Su Qingshan suddenly proposed to her now, Yi Li dared to bet that Yunji's first thought would be that if they got married, they would stay together forever and she would be taught by Su Qingshan for the rest of her life. Therefore, the success rate of young Master Qingshan's proposal was probably even lower than that of young Master Mei. Do you want to marry a wife or find a student? I have never seen anyone teach their future wife like a student, and even treat her more seriously than a student. Can't you see that the little girl wants to run away when she sees you? Mo Xiaoyao mocked lazily. Even he could see the little girl's pitiful look when she saw Su Qingshan. She felt wronged but did not dare to refute. Fortunately, the girl's parents were no longer around. If any man dared to treat his darling like that, I would kill him. His Highness Prince Ding thought with a murderous look. Su Qingshan looked thoughtful. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Big brother, Yungu has learned very well. Even Jing and eldest aunt have praised her. She has no interest in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry and songs. Don't force her anymore." Mo Xiaoyao hugged Yi Li and laughed gloatingly. "Be careful not to force the little girl too much. You can't beat her." "Thank you, Prince, for your advice," young Master Qingshan said indifferently. He waved to Yi Li and turned to leave. As he walked, the smile on young Master Qingshan's lips gradually faded. She didn't like it. Then he would tell her later that he would not force her to learn. In fact, the little girl clearly did not want to learn but was aggrieved and did not dare to say anything. She was very cute. Chapter 11:16. Su Qingshan didn't have the chance to tell Yungu his decision because the next morning, the Su family found that Yungu was missing. She wasn't missing or kidnapped, but Yungu left a letter telling everyone that she was going out to practice medicine to help the world. Staring at his beautiful letter for a long time, young Master Qingshan was sure of one thing. The little girl he had raised for more than half a year had run away from home. "Qingshan, look at this." Lady Su took the letter left by Yungu with some embarrassment and looked at her son with some worry. Young Master Qingshan's expression really made Lady Su a little worried. She had never seen her son so sad in her life. Lady Su was happy and worried at the same time. She was happy because she finally confirmed that her son really treated Yungu differently. She was worried that Yungu was alone outside. What if she encountered danger? And looking at her son's expression now, he would probably teach Yungu a lesson when he found her. Wouldn't Yungu be more afraid of him then? When would she be able to marry her eldest daughter-in-law? After thinking about it, Lady Su decided to talk to her son first. "Qingshan, don't worry. I've already sent a letter to Li. We'll find Yungu soon. But when Yungu comes back, don't scare her anymore. She's a poor little girl." Young Master Qingshan was stunned. He looked at his mother and asked, "Mother, you also think I'm not good to Yungu?" Lady Su couldn't help rolling her eyes and lamenting, "What sin have I committed? Why did I give birth to such a stupid son? She's a little girl in her teens. It's fine if you don't comfort and take care of her gently. But you arrange a lot of homework every day and criticize her all the time. Not to mention a little girl, even a man can't stand you. Don't you see that even Qingyan is afraid of you? Fortunately, Yungu has a good temper. Ordinary girls would have fallen out with you long ago. Speaking of this, Lady Su also felt very sad. Everyone said that she was lucky to have given birth to several good sons, but who could understand her son's pain of not being able to find a wife when he was already in his 30s? The Su family didn't like a girl who threw herself at them, but with her son's stupid appearance he couldn't marry a girl who didn't throw herself at him. Look, it wasn't easy to find an interesting girl, but she was scared away in the blink of an eye. Naturally, young Master Qingchen did not know that his mother was despising him in every possible way. Sitting in a chair in the hall, he lowered his eyebrows and pondered. Eldest aunt, eldest brother, what happened? Outside the door, Yili rushed in, followed by a displeased Prince Ding and Emo Xiuyao. Today was Su Qingfeng and Su Qingbai's wedding. Everyone stayed up late, so only eldest Madame Su and young Master Qingchen were in the Su mansion. Yili dragged Emo Xiuyao over when she heard the news sent by Madame Su. His Highness Prince Ding's displeasure at being disturbed early in the morning with his beloved wife. Looking at Su Qingchen, who was sitting in the hall, Emo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. Isn't this young Master Qingchen? What was going on? You didn't scare the girl away, did you? Just now this prince seemed to have seen Xinyang coming over here. Losing someone else's daughter for no reason, this is really… Xiuyao. Yili glared at Emo Xiuyao angrily, then looked at Su Qingchen and said, Eldest brother, don't worry, I've already sent someone to look for her. There will be news soon. Emo Xiuyao didn't care. He was happy to see Su Qingchen unhappy. Especially the intelligent young Master Qingchen. He actually scared away the girl he liked. Su Qingchen hadn't married for so many years. Was it because he didn't know how to pursue the girl he liked? Emo Xiuyao criticized in his heart. Su Qingchen nodded and smiled faintly at Yili. Thank you. Yili shook her head and said, Eldest brother, what are you saying? We're family, there's no need to thank me. Yungu just left, she couldn't have gone far. That's not necessarily true. Emo Xiuyao leaned on Yili's shoulder and said with a smile, that little girl's martial arts are very good. She's also proficient in medicine. If she doesn't want to come back, even Qilin may not be able to bring her back without hurting her, right? Right. Xin Yang's residents lost a precious horse from the western region. Hearing his words, Su Qingchen couldn't help but frown. A precious horse from the western region could travel thousands of miles in a day. Yungu had ridden the horse for an entire night. Who knew where she had gone by now? Beside her, eldest Madame Su also looked anxious. What should we do? Lier, tell the people who went to be careful, don't hurt Yungu. If she doesn't want to come back, don't force her. It won't be good if she gets hurt. Yili smiled and said, Eldest aunt, don't worry. They will know what to do. Madam, eldest young master, Mr. Shin is here. The servant outside the door reported. Before eldest Madame Su could speak, Xinyang barged in from outside and glared fiercely at Su Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen, where did Yungu go? Young Master Qingchen shook his head and said, I don't know. Xinyang was furious and pointed at Su Qingchen. What did you say to Yungu? Why would she run away from home all of a sudden? Although they didn't spend much time together, Xinyang already knew Yungu very well. If it wasn't for something serious, she wouldn't have left Glass City alone. After losing her parents, Yungu, who had lived alone for 3 years, cherished the new home she just got very much. Emo Xiuyao smiled and said, Young Master Qingchen said that Miss Shin is his fiancée. Maybe Miss Shin was just shy. Fiancée? Why didn't anyone know that young Master Qingchen had a fiancée? In the hall, eldest Madame Su and Xinyang were both shocked. Eldest Madame Su was pleasantly surprised while Xinyang was shocked and angry. Young Master Qingchen stood up and stopped eldest Madame Su and Xinyang from talking. He smiled faintly and said, The most important thing now is to find Yungu. Your Highness Prince Ding, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the official business of the Prince Ding mansion during this period. Emo Xiuyao sat up vigilantly and stared at Su Qingchen in confusion. What do you want to do? He didn't know why, but he had a bad feeling. Su Qingchen looked at him and said faintly, Didn't your Highness Prince Ding say that Yungu was scared away by me? Shouldn't I go and find her? Can I pretend that I didn't say anything? His Highness Prince Ding, who went for wool and came back shorn, was extremely regretful. Chapter 11-17. In June and July the Central Plains were unbearably hot. In Guangling City, north of the Yunnan River, a young girl dressed in yellow was strolling leisurely on the streets. Although the war had just ended not long ago, all the areas north of the Yunnan River were under the control of the Prince Ding Mansion. The Dechu state, which originally had vast land, was now truly content with a small corner. The Prince Ding Mansion was very efficient. In just a short 2 to 3 months, Guangling, which had not been affected by the war, had already returned to its former prosperity. The young girl dressed in yellow walked leisurely on the streets, occasionally looking here and there. Her beautiful little face was brimming with a bright smile, attracting the attention of passers-by. This young girl was Miss Yungu, who had run away from the Su Mansion in Glass City. After leaving Glass City, Yungu headed south. He traveled around while practicing medicine. She lived a very comfortable life. Although she encountered some small problems, it was not difficult for her to solve them with her martial arts. This allowed this young girl, who was traveling alone for the first time since she was young, to arrive at Guangling without any obstructions. Miss, are you Miss Shin Yungu? Yungu was looking at a candy stall on the side of the street and frowning. Just as she was hesitating whether to buy it, a strange man suddenly rushed over and pulled Yungu to ask. Yungu blinked and said with some confusion, "I am Shin Yungu. Who are you? How do you know my name?" "Miss Shin, please save my mother," the man said anxiously. As he spoke, he was about to kneel on the ground. Yungu hurriedly supported him and said, "Don't be anxious. Speak slowly. How do you know I can save your mother?" The man said, "Miss Shin's medical skills are brilliant and her heart is kind. She has saved many lives. This little one heard from others that Miss Shin came to Guangling. That's why I hurriedly chased after you. I beg Miss Shin to be merciful." Seeing his red face, Yungu hurriedly nodded and said, "Don't be anxious. I will definitely save your mother." "Where is your mother?" The man's face was red and he said with some shame, "I was in a hurry to enter the city to find Miss Shin. I left my mother at a farmer's house outside the city." "Then let's go quickly." Seeing that the man was so anxious, Yungu did not dare to delay any longer and directly walked towards the city gate. Similarly, in a tea house in Guangling City, young Master Qingchen, who was dressed in white, was sitting by the window, leisurely looking at the people coming and going on the street below. "Young Master." A man dressed in gray walked up the stairs quickly. He walked to Su Qingchen's side and said in a low voice, "Miss Shin has left the city again." Young Master Qingchen frowned slightly and said, "She just entered the city. Why did she leave the city again?" After young Master Qingchen left Glass City, he followed Yunji's path. However, Yunji's temperament was unstable and his whereabouts were erratic. Sometimes it was normal for him to travel 200 to 300 li a day on a whim. Obviously, young Master Qingchen, who had no strength to truss a chicken, was unable to follow her torment. As a result, they only managed to catch up to Yungu a few days ago. However, Su Qingchen did not go to see Yungu immediately. Instead, she led her men and followed behind her from afar. Yesterday, Su Qingchen guessed that Yungu might come to Guangling. Hence, they arrived at Guangling ahead of time. They did not expect that Yungu would leave the city before they even saw her. Just now, someone on the street came to Miss Shin to seek medical treatment. Miss Shin followed him out. The man in cloth reported in a low voice, "Someone has already followed her. Seek medical treatment?" Young Master Qingchen frowned. Along the way, whenever Yungu met someone who needed help, she would lend a helping hand. For her medical skills to be praised by Shenyang, it was evident that she was indeed very good. Along the way there were some commoners, but, seeing young Master Qingchen's expression darken, the guard hurriedly said, "Young Master, do not worry. Miss Shin's skills are not weak. Furthermore, there are guards secretly following her. Nothing should happen to her." Su Qingchen thought for a while and stood up. "Let's go over and take a look." Yunji's martial arts were indeed not bad, but she basically had no experience in the Jianghu. Otherwise, she would not have been followed all the way without being aware of it. Su Qingchen always felt that the person who stopped her on the street to seek medical treatment was somewhat strange. Even if Yungu had left some reputation in the places she passed, it would not have spread so quickly. And with Yunji's itinerary, it was even more impossible for the other party to follow behind her with a patient. Yes. Seeing young Master Qingchen's serious expression, The guard also knew that something was going to happen. He hurriedly responded and followed Su Qingchen downstairs. Outside Guangling City, Yungu followed the man who was seeking medical treatment. The further they went, the more remote they became. Then she stopped in her tracks with some doubts. Mission, what's wrong? Where is she? The man turned back to look at Yungu and smiled apologetically. Yungu looked at him and frowned. Where is your mother? There is no one around here. The man's expression stiffened. She's right in front. Mission, let's hurry. Yungu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and continued to follow the man forward. After walking for a while, Yungu finally felt that something was wrong. Where are you taking me? Along the way, Yungu had also encountered some things. Naturally, there were not only good people in this world. Although she did not think too much at the beginning because of the man's anxious and pleading face. If there really was a patient, why would she be in such a remote and difficult-to-find place? The man turned back and chuckled at Yungu. A malicious smile appeared on his originally honest and sincere face, instantly making him look repulsive. Hey, Miss Shen, won't you know if you follow me? Why are you asking so much? I'm not going. Yungu said in a low voice, I want to go back. You don't have anyone who wants me to see a doctor. Although I don't have any illness to see? Don't you think this young master has been ill for a long time? A somewhat oily voice came from behind, and a few men suddenly appeared on the originally empty mountain road. The leader was a skinny youth. That person's face was waxy yellow and he was as thin as a match. His pair of turbid eyes carried a hint of wickedness. His originally ordinary appearance had a hint of wretchedness, making one feel extremely disgusted with just one look. However, Yungu silently glanced at the few men in front of her. These people were not ordinary people. Even that skinny and sallow man knew some martial arts. Move aside, I want to go back. Yungu frowned and said with some displeasure. He was not someone who did not have any temper. She kindly came to see a doctor but was deceived. It would be a lie to say that she was not angry. Move aside? Everyone looked at each other and laughed. Miss Shen, this young master has been following you for half a day in order to see you. If I let you go back like this, wouldn't this young master suffer a huge loss? That skinny man stared at Yungu lecherously and smiled. This young master sincerely wants to see Miss Shen's illness. Why don't Miss Shen stay with this young master for a few days? Chapter 11:18. Meeting his cloudy eyes, Yungu felt a wave of disgust. She glanced at him and said, You're not sick. You just need to cultivate your mind properly. This man's face was thin and his eyes were cloudy. It was obvious that he had overindulged in debauchery. After speaking, Yungu no longer paid attention to these people. She turned around and walked back the way she came. When the man saw that Yungu did not give him any face, he could not help but be furious. He waved his hand and said, Hurry up and invite this beauty back to be my guest. Yes. The people around him responded in unison and went forward to surround Yungu. Be careful. Don't hurt this young master's beauty. This person was originally a young master from a famous family near Guangling. However, he did not have any skills and relied on his father's accumulation to indulge in debauchery. He was also lustful and would occasionally kidnap women. However, the heavens were high and the emperor was far away. Now that the world had just settled down, no one cared. When he went out early this morning, he saw Yungu treating the refugees in a small town. This lustful guy actually did not hesitate to follow her for dozens of miles before coming up with a way to trick Yungu. Yungu wasn't a pushover either. She glared at the crowd in displeasure and slapped a man who was closing in on her. Although the people following the man were not experts, they had learned a few kung fu moves. Seeing that Yungu made a move, the others also rushed over to surround Yungu. When the thin man saw that Yungu actually knew martial arts, he could not help but become more excited. You actually know martial arts? Good. Hurry. Bring this little beauty back for this young master. This young master wants to take her as a concubine. Yungu was so angry that her face turned red. She raised her hand and a dark light shot towards the man. That man also knew some martial arts. When he saw the hidden weapon shooting towards him, he quickly dodged to the side. When he turned around and saw the darts nailed to the tree, he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Trash. Hurry up. You can't even beat a woman. The man roared. Although these men were tall and strong, They were definitely not Yunji's opponent in terms of martial arts. During the fight they looked at each other. Two of them looked at Yungu. One of them took out a bag and threw it in Yunji's direction. Yungu was shocked. Tendon softening powder. Yungu was a medical student and naturally knew the power of this muscle weakening powder. However, she was entangled by a few people. Although she tried her best to avoid it, she still got some of it. At that moment he couldn't care less about these people. Yungu waved his palm and forced a man to retreat, then flew into the distance. She was very clear in her heart that once the muscle-weakening powder took effect, she would really be at the mercy of others. What are you waiting for? A bunch of trash. Seeing that the duck that had been in his mouth had flown away, the man immediately became furious and angrily rebuked. Young master. That girl doesn't seem to be an ordinary person. One of them whispered. Although they didn't have much experience, a person who could still run after being poisoned by the muscle-weakening powder, and her martial arts were so powerful no matter how they looked at it, she didn't seem like an ordinary person. What if he really offended someone he shouldn't offend? This young master doesn't care about her. The man sneered. In Guangling, is there anyone more powerful than my Huang family? Wait till she becomes this young master's person. Seeing him like this, these guards naturally didn't dare to object and hurriedly chased in the direction that Yungu escaped. As Yungu used her qinggong to fly in the direction of Guangling City, she clearly felt that she was sweating and her body was somewhat weak, unable to exert any strength. It was very obvious that because of her mad dash, the muscle-weakening powder took effect even more violently. But now she didn't have any antidote on hand that could cure the muscle-weakening powder. Gradually, even her qinggong couldn't be used anymore. Yungu finally fell to the side of the road in exhaustion. Her entire body was so weak that she couldn't even lift her hands. Damn it. Yungu couldn't help but curse those bastards in her heart. At the same time she was somewhat anxious. She remembered. On the way here just now she seemed to have seen some antidote. Yungu tried hard to recall as she forced herself to stand up and walk towards the direction in her memory. But just as she stood up she fell down again. Very quickly those few men caught up again. Seeing Yungu fall to the ground, that thin man laughed complacently. Little beauty, run, why aren't you running? Yungu glared fiercely at him. You bastard, despicable. The man laughed even more complacently. Bastard? Despicable? This is all your fault. If not for you not being obedient, this young master wouldn't want to be so rude to a beauty. This young master's family is rich. As long as you obediently follow this young master back, only you can enjoy endless glory and wealth. Who cares about your family's wealth? Yungu said disdainfully. She also had a lot of money. Sister Li said that the money that father left for her was enough for her to live a life of luxury. That man had long lost his patience. Seeing Yungu like this he couldn't help but sneer. Don't care? When the time comes you won't say that. Come, bring this little beauty back for this young master. Two of the men who accompanied Yungu stepped forward to pull her up. Yungu bit the tip of her tongue hard. Taking advantage of the pain, she threw out a hidden weapon with a wave of her hand. Then, taking advantage of the time when everyone was dodging the hidden weapon, she used the little bit of strength that she had just accumulated to stand up and run forward. Catch her for me. The man's exasperated voice came from behind. Yungu tried her best to run forward. However, no matter how strong a person's willpower was, sometimes they couldn't withstand the effects of the drug. Because she used too much strength, Yungu clearly felt that her vision was blacking out. When she stopped again, not only would she be weak, she would also completely faint. So she desperately told herself not to stop, not to stop. Stop. Damn girl. Those people caught up with her again. Yungu couldn't help but feel a little desperate. She was just a little girl who hadn't experienced many things. It was already very rare for her to be able to persevere until now. Involuntarily, tears fell from the corner of her eyes. Yungu also fell to the ground again. Woo-woo, you're so stupid and still running around. If I didn't come to find you, what would you do? A soft voice with a touch of helplessness sounded. In Yunji's ears, it was no different from the sound of nature. Yungu was thrown into a slightly cold and fragrant embrace. For a moment she couldn't help but be a little stunned. She raised her head and just happened to look into a pair of gentle and calm eyes. However, that pair of eyes was now filled with a faint coldness and waves. Su Qingchen, is it really you? Who else can it be if not me? Su Qingchen sighed helplessly. Looking at her struggling to hold on, he could only sigh with pity. He stroked her hair and said, "It's me. It's okay now. Good girl. Sleep." Yoongu only felt her heart was at ease. She leaned in his arms and slowly closed her eyes. Chapter 11-19. The few men chasing after Yoongu caught up and saw Yoongu lying in the arms of a man dressed in white. The man was dressed in white and his long black hair was draped behind him. When they looked up, they saw a pair of calm eyes that were distant and deep. But at this moment, that pair of eyes carried a faint coldness. Such a handsome and otherworldly man was rarely seen even in a big southern city like Guangling, let alone in such a remote rural area. Everyone could not help but stare blankly. "Who is it? Put down this young master's beauty." The thin man came back to his senses and stepped forward to shout. He had been eyeing this little beauty in front of him for half a day and was finally about to get her. How could he allow someone to snatch her away? Although Guangling had produced beauties since ancient times, a beauty like this little beauty was still hard to come by. Young Master Qingchen looked up and glanced at the crowd indifferently. "Who are you? You've got guts." The thin man was stunned and quickly sneered. "This young master sees that you've got guts. Meddling in other people's business depends on whether you have the ability or not. Listen carefully, this young master is the eldest young master of Guangling's Huang family. In Guangling, no one dares to go against this young master." Originally, seeing Su Qingchen's extraordinary bearing, the man was still a little hesitant. But seeing that he was dressed in white and was an ordinary person who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken, the man's arrogance rose again. In Guangling, although the Huang family could not be said to be able to cover the sky with one hand, their power was great. It was definitely not something a weak scholar from outside could rival. Su Qingchen bent over and picked up Yoongu. He said indifferently, "Huang family is it? I'll remember it." Seeing Su Qingchen about to leave with Yoongu, that young Master Huang was furious. "How dare you? Stop. What are you waiting for?" Hearing their master's order, the few men who followed naturally swarmed forward. But Su Qingchen acted as if he did not see them at all. He turned around and walked in the direction of Guangling. Being ignored by a person who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken, the crowd could not help but be angry. One of them threw a punch at Su Qingchen's back. Unexpectedly, a strong wind blew. Before that man could touch Su Qingchen's clothes, he hugged his fist and fell to the ground, wailing in pain. Everyone couldn't help but jump in fright and look around vigilantly. Unknowingly, several men in gray appeared on the hillside on both sides of the road. He glanced at the crowd coldly before landing in front of Su Qingchen. "Young master." Su Qingchen looked down at the sleeping Yoongu in his arms and said indifferently, "Bring her back to Guangling. Also, get the Guangling governor to come see me." "Understood," the gray-robed man replied in a low voice. With a wave of his hand, a few people behind him neatly took down the crowd and tied them up like dumplings. Young Master Huang stared at Su Qingchen in shock. Someone who could casually ask the governor to meet him was definitely not an ordinary person. Who are you?" Su Qingchen glanced at him calmly, then turned around and left with Yoongu in her arms. The guards behind him looked sympathetically at the emaciated and sickly young Master Huang. Young Master Qingchen had been following Miss Shen everywhere and had lost her several times. He was already in a bad mood. This fellow even sought his own death by falling into young Master Qingchen's hands. He was really too pitiful. In the backyard of an inconspicuous inn in Guangling City, a few people dressed in extraordinary attire were standing in the middle of the courtyard waiting anxiously. At the door not far away, a few gray-robed guards stood expressionlessly, as if they did not notice the uneasiness of these people. The leader was dressed in the attire of a third-rank official. There was already a lot of white hair on his temples. Mixed with his black hair, it looked like a head of gray hair. He was supposed to be a high-ranking official in Guangling City. But now he was frowning and looking uneasy as if the sky was about to fall. Beside him was a middle-aged man who was dressed luxuriously and had a stout appearance. Behind the middle-aged man were a few men and women of different ages. But he obviously could not understand the governor's worries. He only looked anxiously at the guard standing not far away and frowned. "Sir, my son." The man looked at the Guangling governor and frowned. After hearing that his son had been captured, He had planned to send a message to the guards to see who was so daring to behave atrociously in Guangling City. But he did not expect to receive a message from the governor before he left, asking him to immediately rush to this inn. He even specially reminded him to be respectful. He immediately understood that the person his son had offended was not an ordinary person. But when he saw the governor's attitude, he did not think much of it. With the Huang family's influence in Guangling, as long as it was not Prince Ding and Princess Ding, who could do anything to them. There was a saying that a strong dragon could not suppress a snake in its old haunts. Didn't this newly appointed governor have to be respectful to them, the old family of Guangling? The Guangling governor frowned and looked at old Master Huang with an unfriendly expression. After offending young Master Qingchen, he did not know if the Huang family had really committed too many sins. Outsiders who did not know the situation might think that young Master Qingchen was gentle and refined and was a soft-hearted and modest gentleman. But as an official from the Prince Ding mansion, how could they not know? 2 years ago, Prince Ding and Princess Consort were away on expeditions all year round. All the affairs of the Prince Ding mansion were handled by young Master Qingchen. There were many old officials and generals under the Prince Ding mansion who were proud and arrogant. If young Master Qingchen only had wisdom and no iron fist, how could he control these people? If Prince Ding and Princess Consort were really here, he might be able to plead for mercy from Princess Consort. Now that he had offended young Master Qingchen. Looking at the clueless old Master Huang, the Guangling prefecture chief shook his head in his heart and ignored him. He only silently calculated in his heart whether he had overlooked anything during his days in power in Guangling. Seeing the governor's expression, old Master Huang instinctively felt that something was not right. But he could not think of anyone in Guangling that the Huang family could not afford to offend. Even if it were those generals who controlled a large number of troops, the Huang family's wealth could deal with them. Besides, the person who brought the letter back had said that the one who had captured his son was a weak young master. Everyone outside the door had different thoughts. Inside the room, young Master Qingchen did not care about the anxious mood of the crowd. He sat leisurely by the bed and looked at the quiet and delicate face of the sleeping girl. The sleeping girl was more beautiful and pure than when she was awake. One of her hands even stretched out to tug at the corner of the quilt. She slept very sweetly, like a little doll who had not experienced much of the world. Raising his hand to pinch the girl's red cheeks, young Master Qingchen laughed helplessly and said in a low voice, "Isn't it good to stay by my side? Why must you run around? If I am not here this time, what will you do? Since you are born stupid, you should be obedient. I will not despise you. Your little face has lost weight. You are really a little fool." The sleeping girl's slightly curled eyelashes fluttered slightly. Young Master Qingchen calmly withdrew his hand and said with a smile, "Still want to pretend to be asleep?" The sleeping girl immediately opened her eyes. Rubbing her red cheeks, she looked at the handsome young master in front of her and laughed dryly. "Su Qingchen, why are you here?" Chapter 11:20. Young Master Qingchen smiled coldly. "If I wasn't here, you would have become someone's concubine." Yungu, who knew that she was in the wrong and had a natural fear of a certain someone, lowered her head and shrunk her neck in grievance. Su Qingchen looked at her pitiful appearance and his heart softened. He sighed softly, "Don't run around in the future, okay? You should know how dangerous it was today." Yungu didn't care if she understood Su Qingchen's words and nodded repeatedly. Young Master Qingchen rubbed her hair and said, "You've just cured the poison. Rest for a while. I'll go take care of some things." Yungu nodded and blinked her big eyes at young Master Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen stood up and looked at Yungu. He said in a deep voice, "Don't run away again. Otherwise, I'll lock you up and you'll be copying books for the rest of your life." Yunji's little heart trembled. She nodded vigorously and then shook her head desperately. Seeing her like this, the coldness in young Master Qingchen's eyes dissipated a lot. "If you're obedient, I won't punish you." In fact, Miss Yungu was a very interesting person, young Master Qingchen thought silently. However, he couldn't bully her too harshly. Otherwise, the little girl would run away again. "Okay, I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." Yungu, who didn't dare to have any rebellious thoughts, shrunk under the blanket and covered her head, unwilling to face the reality in front of her. Young Master Qingchen smiled faintly and shook his head. He turned and walked out of the door. At the same time his eyes, which were originally filled with faint warmth, were covered with a layer of frost again. As soon as he stepped out of the door, the Guangling prefecture chief greeted him eagerly. "Young master." Su Qingshan raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He glanced at the crowd in the courtyard and turned to walk to the front hall. 2 of the gray-clothed guards at the door were left behind to guard the door. The rest followed silently. The Guangling prefecture chief hesitated for a moment and glared fiercely at old Master Huang's family before hurriedly following. In the parlor, young Master Qingshan sat at the head of the table and drank tea. The arrogant and despotic young Master Huang was tied up like a big dumpling and thrown in the hall. The people of the Huang family had already arrived. A middle-aged woman dressed in luxurious clothes wailed and rushed over. Zuer, what happened to you? Who bullied you?" Young Master Huang was unable to speak for a long time. It was obvious that his mute acupoint had been sealed. He could only try his best to signal the woman with his eyes. Unfortunately, the woman was too anxious and worried to understand what he meant. "I am Guangling Prefecture Chief Li Jie. Greetings to young master." The Guangling Prefecture chief tidied his attire and bowed respectfully. On the other side, old Master Huang was flustered and exasperated. "Lord Li, what exactly is going on? Who is this young master? What right does he have to treat my son like this?" The Guangling governor cursed in his heart for being an idiot. He lowered his eyes and lowered his head as if he didn't hear old Master Huang's words. "Lord Li," young Master Qingshan put down the teacup in his hand and said indifferently, "Yes, young master, please give your orders." The Guangling governor hurriedly replied. Su Qingshan said, "You've already been in Guangling for more than 3 months. You've handled official matters quite well. But how do you explain these things?" A thick stack of papers was thrown into the Guangling prefecture chief's arms. The Guangling prefecture chief hurriedly caught it and flipped it open. The more he read, the paler his face became. It recorded all the crimes committed by the rich and powerful in Guangling who had bullied and humiliated the common people. Some of the cases had been reported to the Yamen but had been suppressed by him. The Guangling prefecture chief also had his difficulties. Guangling had always been in the hands of the Dechu state. In the following years, it had been in the hands of Xiling. But no matter which side it was in, the local landowning households had remained stable. Guangling had once been the capital of the previous dynasty. The landowning households that had remained had a long history and were deeply rooted. He had been born into an ordinary family and had relied on his own abilities to reach the position of prefecture chief. But after arriving in Guangling, he was restrained by the landowning households. In order to smoothly take over Guangling and restore the people's livelihood, he had no choice but to compromise with the landowning households and turn a blind eye to many of their actions. "I know my wrongs. Young master, please punish me." The Guangling prefecture chief knelt on the ground. He didn't explain himself and only asked for forgiveness in a low voice. Su Qingshan looked at him and said, "I also understand why you did these things. There is a reason for everything. I won't punish you, but, since you are the prefecture chief, you are the parent official of the people. I hope that you will first think of the people and not weigh the pros and cons. If you have any difficulties, directly report to the higher-ups. Someone will naturally help you. Even if you act first and report later, the prince and the princess will not blame you. But, if your weighing of the pros and cons causes the people to suffer, not to mention the prince and the princess, even I will not forgive you. You will no longer be the prefecture chief." Actually, saying that the people suffered was too serious. Under Li Jie's rule, Guangming was rather good in all aspects. But the landowning households that had been entrenched in Guangling for a long time were not people that a mere prefecture chief like Li Jie could deal with. Hearing Su Qingshan's words, the Guangling prefecture chief secretly sighed in relief. He knelt respectfully and said, "I understand. I have betrayed the trust of the prince and the princess. I will not dare to do so again." Su Qingshan nodded with satisfaction and said, "Very good. Then let's deal with these matters first." Hearing this, the Guangling prefecture chief couldn't help but take a deep breath. It recorded almost all the crimes of the landowning households in Guangling. If it was really dealt with according to the law, it was likely that all the landowning households in Guangling would be offended. But thinking about how the Prince of Glass City had treated the old officials of the previous dynasty, young Master Qingshan's attitude seemed reasonable. Whether it was the prince or the young master, both were very dissatisfied with these people. Today's matter was just an excuse to make a fuss. What? Seeing his hesitation, Su Qingchen calmly raised his eyebrows and asked. No. I will obey. The Guangling prefecture chief stood up and raised his voice. Men. Soon, the yamen runners waiting outside the door came in and respectfully received the order. The Guangling prefecture chief recited a long list of names in one breath. They were all the hedonistic sons of the landowning households in Guangling City with bad reputations. He said in a low voice, quickly arrest these people and bring them to justice. With such an order, even the yamen runners couldn't help but be stunned. Looking at the extraordinarily handsome young master sitting at the head of the table, they hurriedly accepted the order and left. Lordly, what is the meaning of this? Old Master Huang couldn't react to this sudden change and looked at the Guangling prefecture chief as he questioned. The Guangling prefecture chief laughed coldly and said, the others have not arrived yet. Why don't we deal with the matter at hand first? What do you think, young master? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, all right. Huang Yaozu, you used the power of the Huang family to kidnap a woman and force her to be a concubine, causing the death of a family of 3. Do you know your crime? What? Chapter 1121. Hearing the Guangling prefecture chief's words, everyone in the Huang family was momentarily stunned. It was not only because the Huang family was so powerful in Guangling that no one dared to control them. Furthermore, the matter that the Guangling governor was talking about should have happened 2 to 3 years ago, and the Huang clan had already suppressed it. It was impossible for the Guangling governor, who had only been in office for 2 to 3 months, to even know about it, let alone investigate. However, what the Guangling governor said in the air was completely accurate, even down to how many people had died. Old Master Huang looked at the white-robed man in shock. He couldn't figure out who he was. Although young Master Qingchen did not reprimand him, the Guangling prefecture chief was already very ashamed. Seeing that old Master Huang was still glancing at Su Qingchen, he was even angrier. It wasn't that he didn't want to deal with these old nobles after taking office, but now that the world had just settled down, the most important thing was to stabilize the people. These landowning households had been entrenched in Guangling for many years. As long as they stirred up a little trouble, he would not be able to suppress them. At that time, it would be his mistake to cause a disturbance in Guangling, which had just settled down. But now that he had young Master Qingchen's support, he naturally didn't have any misgivings. He wanted to deal with this matter boldly and decisively so that he could return Guangling to a peaceful world. Huang Shiliang, I'm asking you a question. What are you looking at? The Guangling governor asked in a deep voice. Old Master Huang's heart skipped a beat. His intuition told him that the situation today was not good. However, even though he knew something was wrong, he couldn't just let it go. This was because young Master Huang Yaozu was the only son of the Huang family. Lordly, I'm afraid there's some misunderstanding here. My son has always abided by the rules. How could he do such an evil thing? Someone must be framing my Huang clan. Please investigate this matter thoroughly. Governor Li was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at Huang Yaozu, who was trapped on the ground and couldn't move, and said, follow the rules? If he followed the rules, then how did he end up being tied up like this? Old Master Huang stole a glance at the white-robed young master who was calmly drinking tea and said in a low voice, who knows? Could it be that they deliberately set a trap to frame my son? Su Qingchen, what are you doing? Just as Li Taisho was about to get angry, a clear and melodious voice came from the door. Everyone was stunned. They turned their heads and saw a delicate and beautiful girl in yellow standing at the door, looking at them with a strange expression. He saw that the young girl's cheeks were blushing and there was a faint blush on her cheeks. It was obvious that she had just woken up. Most importantly, Old Master Huang's expression was stiff as he turned around to look at the white-robed young master sitting at the head of the table. His expression was twisted. Young Master Qingchen. Old Master Huang's vision darkened and he almost fell to the ground. How could he not know what his son was like? Just by looking at this rare beauty in front of him, Old Master Huang could guess what had happened. But who would have thought that his son would offend young Master Qingchen in Guangling? It was known that young Master Qingchen was a man of his word within the jurisdiction of the Prince Ding mansion. Even Prince Ding himself had to yield to him. Did the heavens really want to exterminate the Huang family? Su Qingchen looked at Yun Gu disapprovingly. She waved at her and said, "Didn't I tell you to rest well? Why did you come out again?" Yungu looked at the people in the hall curiously. She stepped into the hall and walked to Su Qingchen. "I can't sleep." Su Qingchen patted the chair beside her and said, "Since you can't sleep, just sit here for a while." Yungu nodded and sat down beside Su Qingchen indifferently. She blinked her eyes and looked at the person who was tied up like a dumpling and asked, "Su Qingchen, what are you doing?" Su Qingchen smiled and said, "Lord Li is investigating the case. I'm here to take a look. You sit and take a look too." Yungu glared at the person on the ground and nodded heavily. "Yes, that guy is a bad guy. Lord Li must punish him severely." Su Qingchen lovingly rubbed the hair on her head and said with a smile, "Lord Li handles things fairly. He will definitely punish him severely." Below, Governor Li's mouth secretly twitched. Must Huang Yaozu be severely punished to be considered fair? Since young Master Qingchen had said so, what else could he say as a subordinate? "Lord Li." Su Qingchen calmly glanced at Governor Li. Governor Li's heart trembled. He quickly put away the criticism in his heart and said with a serious face, "Huang Shiliang, do you have anything else to say?" Master Huang's legs went soft and he finally knelt on the ground. Few people in the world had not heard of young Master Qingchen's name. People with power like them naturally knew more than ordinary people. They also understood that the name young Master Qingchen represented not only the peerless talent and incomparable intelligence of the Su family, but also the power that was enough to intimidate thousands of people in the world. Young Master Qingchen, I know my mistake. Please spare my son's life." After knowing the identity of the person sitting there, Master Huang also knew that it was useless to deny. He could only beg bitterly to save his son's life. Seeing Governor Li's inquiring gaze, Su Qingchen calmly said, "Lord Li is investigating the case. Why is Lord Li looking at me? In that case he would be punished according to the law." Governor Li understood in his heart. His expression became serious and he said in a deep voice, "Since he has admitted his guilt. Guards, Huang Yaozu bullied the common people, kidnapped a woman and caused her death. Take him to prison first and choose a day to behead him." This sentence had already cut off Huang Yaozu's path of survival. In the hall, not only did Master Huang's family's expression change, Huang Yaozu, who was tied to the ground, also struggled desperately. He desperately looked in Yunji's direction with begging eyes. Yungu frowned and turned to look at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen said indifferently in a low voice, "You are lucky that I saved you. Think about it, if other girls met him would they be so lucky? Also he killed a family of 3. Yungu widened her eyes and angrily glared at Huang Yaozu. She lightly snorted and turned her small face away. "Bad guy. I don't want to save him." Seeing Yunji's performance, young Master Qingchen laughed and shook his head. Governor Li waved his hand and ordered people to quickly take Huang Yaozu away. Master Huang wailed and knelt on the ground. "Young Master Qingchen, please spare my life. My son knows his mistake. Please spare his life. This lowly one only has this one son. I beg young master to leave a trace of the Huang family's bloodline." Yungu looked at Master Huang and frowned. She said crisply, "You only have this one son in your family. There is no one left in the family that was killed by him." Master Huang was speechless. When his son forced a family of 3 to die, how could he have thought of today's retribution? It's all this lowly one's teaching. It's fine. I beg young Master Qingchen to give me a way out. This lowly one is willing to give away all the family's wealth. I only beg young master to spare my son's life." Su Qingchen's eyes flashed. He said indifferently, "Give away all the family's wealth? Are you serious?" Master Huang was stunned. He finally reacted and quickly said, Of course it's serious. I beg young master to show mercy." Chapter 11:22. After a moment of silence, Su Qingchen looked at Governor Li and said, "Send someone to raid the Huang family. Give each of the Huang family's servants 10 taels of silver. As for the rest, don't leave behind a single tael of silver." Governor Li didn't expect that there would be such a stroke. He couldn't react for a moment. Yes, this subject will do it now. Then, how should we deal with Huang Yaozu?" Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and smiled. Since old Master Huang is willing to use all of his family's wealth to save his son's life, sentence him to be sent to the border. He will never return and will not be pardoned. Old Master Huang's face turned pale. What was the difference between this and death? Generally, as long as one's life was still alive, there was always room for negotiation. There would always be a few cases of amnesty in one's life. However, with young Master Qingchen's sentence, everything was over. No. Old Master, our Huang family can't be so late. The people behind Old Master Huang who were originally pleading for mercy were suddenly unwilling. The Huang family had nothing left but Huang Yaozu to be sent to the border for eternity? No one was willing to pay such a price. Instead, it was better for Old Master Huang to work hard to see if he could have another child. Even an adopted one was better than this. Old Master, please reconsider. Not to mention others, even Old Master Huang himself was hesitating. What he wanted was for his son to be able to carry on the family line. How could he be willing to exchange all of his family's wealth for such a result? Looking at Old Master Huang's expression, young Master Qingchen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He said to Governor Li, "It seems that Old Master Huang is unwilling. Lord Li, let's go by the rules." Old Master Huang couldn't say any more words to plead for mercy. He could only watch as his son was taken away and couldn't help but cry loudly. The hall was so lively, but the outside wasn't calm either. The bullies and their families who were escorted by the bailiffs were waiting outside. Although they didn't know what happened, they couldn't help but look at each other when they heard Old Master Huang's cries coming from inside. They felt that something was wrong. Although Old Master Huang didn't contribute all of his family's wealth in the end, the Huang family wouldn't be able to grow after a few days. The landlords and rich merchants of Guangling would hate him to death. Which family didn't have a few unfilial children? Which family of these rich families hadn't done a few shameful things? Unfortunately, Huang Yaozu was bumped into by young Master Qingchen. If he had not been caught by young Master Qingchen, perhaps young Master Qingchen would not have cared about these matters in Guangling. Therefore, these unlucky people would all vent their anger on the Huang family. On this day, in this inconspicuous inn in Guangling, the hedonistic sons of noble families and noble families who had been tyrannical and dangerous in Guangling were all arrested. What awaited them might be beheading, exile, or imprisonment. When they came out of the inn, all of them looked like they were about to collapse. It attracted the curiosity of the passers-by. "Su Qingchen, you're amazing." Only Su Qingchen and Yungu were left in the empty hall. Yungu sat on a chair, propping up her chin as she gazed at young Master Qingchen in snow-white robes. Her eyes were filled with admiration. She had also seen the crimes that Su Qingchen had committed. Su Qingchen had only sat there and said nothing, but those seemingly powerful people were so frightened that they knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. However, Yungu would not plead for mercy for them. Those old people with white hair were crying. Although they were very pitiful, she had seen many rich people bullying ordinary people along the way. Those who were bullied were even more pitiful. Every time she met them, she could only teach those people a lesson and then give them some silver. However, Su Qingchen easily put all those bad guys in jail. In the future, they would never come out to harm ordinary people again. Young Master Qingchen had seen many gazes of admiration, but he suddenly found that Miss Yunji's gaze made him feel more comfortable. With a smile, he raised his eyebrows and said, "How am I amazing? You punished many bad people." Yungu said, "Those were interrogated by Lord Li." Su Qingchen smiled. "But those evidence were given to Lord Li by you." Yungu said, "Those were collected by the Shadow Guard." Su Qingchen said with a gentle smile. Miss Yungu tilted her head and said, "But I feel that those people are very afraid of you, but they are not afraid of Lord Li at all." Although it was Lord Li who was speaking, she clearly felt that those people did not dare to move because of Su Qingchen, who was sitting on the throne, and not because of the stern-looking Lord Li. "You have good eyes," Su Qingchen said with a smile. Yungu said happily, "Of course." Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a faint smile and said, "Since you have good eyes, how can you not see that those people are liars? Come, tell me, how many times have you been deceived along the way?" Yunji's little face immediately turned red. "I haven't been deceived that many times." "Oh? What?" Su Qingchen looked at her with a smile, took out a few things from his sleeve and put them on the table and asked, "What are these?" "This is my hairpin jade pendant, and my purse." "Why are they with you?" Meeting young Master Qingchen's faint smile, Yungu gradually lost her voice. Su Qingchen looked at her helplessly and sighed softly, "What a stupid girl." You don't even know that you have been deceived. 2 days ago you gave your jade pendant to the person who buried his father. Do you know that this jade pendant of yours is enough for an ordinary person to live for a lifetime? But her father is really dead. I didn't have any silver at that time. Yungu argued in a low voice. He was a doctor after all. How could she not know better than Su Qingchen whether a person was dead or alive? Su Qingchen said, the person is dead, but do you know if that is her father? Yungu was speechless. Su Qingchen picked up the hairpin on the table and gently put it back on for her. Then he picked up the jade pendant and hung it for her, saying, look at your journey. If I found you a few days later, would you not even have money to eat? Yungu lowered her head in embarrassment. She counted with her fingers and said softly, I know medicine. I also know how to pick herbs. So she would not go without food. Young Master Qingchen nodded in agreement. That's right. You know medicine, but you have to pay for the medical expenses yourself. You know how to pick herbs, but you give them all to others. Then I need help. Yungu was a little depressed. Although she did not know if her father practiced medicine, he left behind a lot of gold, silver and jewelry. Her foster father also had a lot of property. She was the only one who brought a lot of money when she ran away from home. But she was getting poorer and poorer. Young Master Qingchen smiled and patted her head, saying, now you know how stupid you are. Yungu puffed up her cheeks in dissatisfaction and said angrily, I'm not stupid. Foster father said I'm the smartest. Su Qingchen threw her a disapproving look. Yungu was immediately discouraged. She muttered sadly, how could this be? I helped them out of kindness. Why did they lie to me? Su Qingchen said softly, there are many bad people in this world. Do you think that no one dares to bully you like in Glass City? Who told you to run away from home? As soon as he said that, Yungu looked at Su Qingchen vigilantly. She also remembered that Su Qingchen said she was his fiancée the night before she ran away from home. She suddenly felt goosebumps. Why are you here? Su Qingchen smiled indifferently. What do you think? You ran away from home without saying anything. Do you know how anxious your family is? What if you encounter danger? How do you want the Su family to explain to Mr. Shen? I didn't run away from home. I want to practice medicine everywhere and help the world. Yungu tried to open her eyes wide so that she would not look so guilty. Su Qingchen did not say anything. He just looked at her calmly with a smile, but it made Yungu feel more and more guilty. Then you can't blame me. It's all your fault. I don't want to be your fiancé. Young Master Qingchen's eyes darkened. He lowered his eyes slightly and asked, oh, what? Yungu bit her cherry lips and looked at Su Qingchen with some grievance. Anyway, I just don't want it. She would not tell Su Qingchen that she did not like to study. After a moment of silence, young Master Qingchen smiled and raised his hand to pull her to him. He smiled and said, I know. You don't want to write or memorize, right? Yungu felt a little embarrassed that her thoughts were exposed. She muttered softly, so what if I do? I just don't like to study. I'm just very stupid. Young Master Qingchen laughed. He deeply felt that he had bullied the little girl too much. In fact, Yungu was not stupid at all. How could someone who could make Qin Jing, his mother and second aunt, praise her for her learning in less than a year be stupid? It was just that the little girl was not very interested in music, chess, calligraphy and painting. She spent most of her energy on medicine. Then, what if I don't let you copy books or memorize books in the future? Su Qingchen asked softly. Yunji's eyes lit up and she looked at Su Qingchen in surprise. Su Qingchen's gentle and elegant smile made people unable to help but indulge in it. If you don't have to memorize books or write in the future, are you willing to be my fiancé? This. Yungu hesitated. Young Master Qingchen said lightly, look at you. You were cheated the moment you went out. If you go out with me in the future, no one will dare to cheat you. No matter how many people you save, you won't be out of money. You can save whoever you want. If you can't find medicinal herbs or medical skills, I can also ask the Shadow Guard in the Prince Ding mansion to help you find them. Also, today's incident will not happen again. What do you think? Yungu blinked and felt that her mind was a little messy. However, Su Qingchen's words seemed to make sense. Then we can go out together now. Young Master Qingchen shook his head and smiled. Men and women should not be so close. If we go out together without any relationship, others will misunderstand. It's not good for your reputation. Of course, It's not good for mine either. Look at Li Erjinger and the rest. They only go out with Prince Ding and second brother. Sister Qingjing only went out with second brother Su other than playing in Glass City. Have you thought about it? If you are not willing, let's go back to Glass City. If you are my fiancé, we can still go out and walk around. It's okay to walk around for a year or so. Young Master Qingchen smiled. Sure, Yungu replied casually as she pondered over it. Young Master Qingchen, is it really a man to abduct a little girl like this? The shadow guard outside the door looked at each other. Chapter 1123. The dizzy Miss Yungu did not know that her momentary daze had caused her to sell everything she was wearing. But even if she figured it out later, she would not have the guts to reject someone again. Young Master Qingchen did not care about the little girl's lack of brains. Seeing Yungu obediently nodding her head, he felt very satisfied. He raised his hand and rubbed the black hair on Yunji's head. His usually calm and handsome face was full of doting. Young Master Qingchen was too outstanding and too aloof. As a result, he saw everything too clearly. Even his emotions were weaker than ordinary people's. Even though he had seen Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's love, Han Mingyue's infatuation with Su Zuidi, and even Feng San, Qin Feng and his brothers and his family had all obtained happiness. But young Master Qingchen could not understand these feelings. He did not think much of those who were trapped and suffering by love. If he had not met Yungu, even young Master Qingchen would not believe that he would one day do all kinds of boring things like Mo Xiaoyao, who he once thought was extremely stupid. He did not hesitate to trick Yungu into agreeing to be his fiancée. And when Yungu nodded her head and agreed, the joy and satisfaction that emerged in his heart was indescribable. It was like someone had once cursed him. What is love in this world? Everything has its vanquisher. I hope one day you fall into it and never climb out. Yungu, who was comforted by young Master Qingchen, rubbed her head against his palm comfortably and smiled. Yungu found that after meeting Su Qingchen this time, other than being angry at her for running away from home, Su Qingchen had been very gentle to her. Other than occasionally scolding her for being stupid, he did not teach her a lesson or punish her. Before Su Qingchen could say anything, he was interrupted by the guard who came in to report. Reporting to young master, the head of the Liu family in Guangling City sent someone to send an invitation. The Liu family and the landlords of Guangling are holding a banquet to welcome young master. The guard probably understood that he might have disturbed the young master's good fortune, so he hurriedly pushed an outsider to the front as a shield. Su Qingchen frowned. He had just dealt with a large number of talented and powerful profligate sons of reputable families in Guangling City. Logically speaking, this face had to be given. If it was only Su Qingchen himself, he would naturally not accept these invitations. However, young Master Qingchen had not forgotten that he was also the right prime minister of the Prince Ding mansion. He could not let half of the rich merchants in Guangling flee to Jiangnan after he left. After giving it some thought, Su Qingchen nodded and said, "Got it. We'll be there later." We are not alone. Yungu looked at Su Qingchen indifferently. Su Qingchen, do I have to go too? Su Qingchen smiled and said, "Aren't you my fiancé? Why not?" Yungu pouted, not daring to say that she had not thought things through and had been tricked by Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled and pinched Yunji's little face, saying, "Be good, Yungu. Tomorrow we'll leave Glass City. After that we'll go wherever you want to go." Hearing this, Yunji's little face lit up and she nodded heavily, saying, "I'll keep my word." Young Master Qingchen smiled and said, "When have I not kept my word?" At night, the Liu family in Guangling City was brightly lit and bustling. More than half of the reputable people in Guangling had gathered here. Although many of the aristocratic families in Guangling City had been dealt with in the past half a day. However, there were not many families like the Huang family who had a lecherous son who acted recklessly and even caused people's lives to be lost. Many who should be punished were punished and those who should be beaten were beaten. Most importantly, no matter what, this young Master Qingchen could not be offended. Not only was young Master Qingchen known throughout the world as the immortal young master, he was also the right prime minister of the Prince Ding mansion. His position was only below Prince Ding and the princess consort. If Prince Ding ascended the throne and proclaimed himself as the emperor, young Master Qingchen would be the rightful prime minister who founded the country. Needless to say, young Master Qingchen was Princess Ding's cousin and the little heir's uncle. In short, As long as they wanted to continue living in the Prince Ding Mansion's territory, young Master Qingchen could not be offended. The Lu family was a famous family in Guangling. Although they might not be very wealthy, they were a scholarly family with a heritage of over 100 years. Usually they were quite strict with their children. At least this time, other than the two branches of the Lu family being found to have used the Lu family's name to oppress the common people, there was nothing too ugly to look at. It was also because of this that the Lu family had the face to set up a banquet and invite young Master Qingchen. Su Qingchen brought Yungu to the Lu family. Master Lu had already brought his family and the family heads of Guangling to wait at the door. "Welcome, young Master Qingchen." Looking at the grandiose display in front of him, Su Qingchen sighed helplessly and said indifferently, "Master Lu, you have troubled yourself. There is no need for these empty formalities." Master Lu stood up after giving his thanks. When he raised his head, he saw a beautiful young lady dressed in light yellow standing beside Su Qingchen looking at them curiously. He could not help but be stunned. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and held Yunji's hand, saying indifferently, "This is my fiancée. Her surname is Shin." Greetings, Miss Shin." Master Lu hurriedly said, but at the same time he was thinking in his heart. He did not seem to have heard of any large family in Glass City with the surname Shin. This young lady's face was full of curiosity and innocence. She did not look like a well-bred young lady from a scholarly family. Yungu was a martial artist and her senses were naturally sharper than ordinary people. The moment Su Qingchen spoke, he clearly felt that the gazes of the crowd were different. There was even some hostility. Yungu looked in that direction and saw a beautiful woman in a moon-white dress standing not far away, staring at him. Although she was a little unhappy, Yungu still remembered the etiquette taught by eldest Madame Su. She nodded slightly at the lady, but she did not expect the lady to sweep her a glance and lower her head. Yungu snorted unhappily in her heart and ignored her. "Young Master Qingchen, Miss Shin, please come in." Master Lu's reaction was also very fast. He was only stunned for a moment before he regained his senses and respectfully invited the two of them in. The Lu Manor had already prepared a banquet and was waiting for Su Qingchen's arrival. However, Yunji's arrival was obviously a surprise to everyone. What was more surprising was that this young lady was actually young Master Qingchen's fiancée. Master Lu hesitated for a moment, but still went forward and said with a smile, "Young Master Qingchen, this Miss Shin? Why don't my humble wife and my daughter entertain her? What do you think?" Su Qingchen lowered his head and looked at Yungu, who still had her head lowered. He did not know what she was thinking and said with a smile, "No need, Yungu can just sit with me." Master Huang had no choice but to agree and leave to prepare. Su Qingchen pulled Yungu to sit at the best seat in the banquet and immediately attracted the attention of countless people. It was the first time in Yunji's life that she was being watched by so many people. He suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Su Qingchen did not care about her and only reached out to pick up some of her favorite dishes for her. He then turned to the side and chatted with the guests. Chapter 11:24. Yungu was bored as she sat beside Su Qingchen, staring at the delicacies in front of her. She didn't understand what they were saying and didn't like to hear it. She didn't have the appetite to eat as she was stared at by many unkind eyes. She could only sit aside and stare blankly. "Why isn't Miss Shin saying anything? Are you bored?" Just as Yungu was feeling bored to death, a gentle female voice sounded in his ears. Yungu looked up and saw the woman in the white dress that she had seen at the entrance walking towards her. Her voice was soft, but Su Qingchen, who was sitting beside Yungu, heard it. He turned around and looked at the girl. Master Lu, who was sitting on Su Qingchen's right, also looked over. He looked lovingly at the girl and smiled. "This is my daughter, Danruo." The girl hurriedly bowed to Su Qingchen and smiled. "Danruo greets young master." Su Qingchen's eyes flashed and he smiled faintly. "Miss Lu doesn't need to be so courteous. What's wrong with Yungu? Are you bored?" Su Qingchen only glanced at Lu Danruo before his gaze landed on Yungu again. He asked with concern. At the same time he felt helpless. Yungu obviously didn't like these social events, but he didn't feel at ease if he didn't bring her along. Yungu looked at Su Qingchen and suddenly felt a little better. She shook her head slightly. Seeing that Su Qingchen only glanced at her indifferently, Miss Lu's eyes dimmed, but she quickly smiled again. She looked at Su Qingchen and said, Sister Shin must be bored. Why don't Donrua accompany you for a walk in the garden? Although our Lu Manor's garden can't be compared to Glass City, it still has its own style. Yungu turned to look at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled, if you want to go then go. If not, we'll go back soon. Although she didn't like this kind of banquet, Yungu knew that Su Qingchen must have his own intentions for attending. She shook her head and said, I'll go play in the garden. Su Qingchen smiled and nodded. He summoned 2 guards to follow Yungu before letting her leave. This action naturally caused Yungu to pout unhappily. Her martial arts were no worse than those guards. Su Qingchen only smiled faintly and insisted on his own opinion. Young Master Qingchen really cares for Miss Shen. Old Master Lu smiled awkwardly. But in her heart she cursed, I wonder what's going on with the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family. In the Prince Ding mansion there were not many princes who took concubines, and the Su family basically did not take any concubines. Now even some of the young and powerful men in the Prince Ding mansion were learning from Prince Ding. How were the families who had raised many concubine daughters supposed to live? Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, Yunj is the future daughter-in-law of the Su family. Naturally we have to take good care of her. Young Master's right. Come, let me propose a toast to Young Master. In the back garden of the LV family, LV Donrua was walking around with Yungu. Along the way LV Donrua kept talking, but Yunji's answers were few and far between. In such a situation, LV Donrua's originally smiling face could not help but become a little gloomy. This girl was simply like a taciturn gourd. She did not open her mouth to speak at all. She did not know why young Master Qingchen liked her. LV Donrua did not like Yungu, and Yungu also did not like the girl in front of her. As soon as the two left the banquet she chattered non-stop. She kept asking Su Qingchen what he liked to eat, what he hated. In short, 3 sentences would not leave Su Qingchen. How did she know what Su Qingchen liked and disliked? If she wanted to ask, why didn't she ask Su Qingchen directly? Why did she have to ask her? She even pretended that she liked to play with her. Did she think that she did not see her secretly rolling her eyes at the door? Yungu, who was in a bad mood, rarely threw a tantrum in front of outsiders. She walked to the side of the flower terrace and sat down with LV Donrua behind her back, unwilling to leave. LV Donrua looked at Yunji's back and frowned. She walked over and spread an embroidered handkerchief on the flower terrace before carefully sitting down. She frowned and looked at Yungu saying, Little sister Yungu, which family are you from? We haven't heard of any famous family in Glass City with the surname Shen. We already know each other. You don't have to be so petty. Yungu looked at her silently and said, Our family is not famous. Also, I'm older than you. I'm not your little sister. Yungu could tell at a glance that LV Donrua was only 15 years old. She was 17 years old. Naturally, she was much older than her. However, Yungu forgot that LV Donrua was not a doctor. Naturally, she did not have such good eyesight. Not to mention Yungu looked young. She looked even younger than the gentle and charming LV Donrua. The smile on LV Donrua's face froze. She looked at Yungu and frowned. So she came from a small family. No wonder she was so rude. LV Donrua rolled her eyes and squeezed out a smile again, saying, Then how did big sister Yungu get to know young Master Qingchen? Yungu was a little unhappy. I happened to see Su Qingchen when I was gathering herbs in the mountains. We got to know each other. The smile on LV Donrua's face deepened. So she was just a herbalist. His expression became even more disgusted and disdainful as he looked at Yungu. Yungu wrinkled her little nose. If LV Donrua did not like her, she did not like her either. She stood up and walked to the other side. LV Donrua, who was left behind, was so angry that her face almost twisted. She was also one of the most noble young ladies in Guangling City. If it were not for young Master Qingchen, she would not have gone to apologize to a little girl who came out of nowhere. Now that she saw Yungu being so rude, she could not care less and scolded angrily, Hey, do you have any manners at all? You really come from a small family. You don't know the rules at all. Not far away, 2 shadow guards had been paying attention to the situation here. Seeing this, they could not help but look at each other and shook their heads. Was Miss Yungu doing this on purpose or on purpose? If Miss Yungu told LV Donrua that her adoptive father was Xin Yang, LV Donrua would not dare to provoke her. You are the rude one. Miss Yungu was angry. She glared at LV Donrua and said angrily, young ladies from noble families will not be like you and keep asking about Su Qingshan. If you want to know, why don't you ask Su Qingshan yourself? Su Qingshan is my fiancé. You are not allowed to ask. You are the rude one. Do you think I have never seen a young lady from a noble family? After saying that, Miss Yungu snorted disdainfully. Sister Zheng Sister Li and Sister Tianxiang were all young ladies from noble families. They were not as annoying as Miss Lu. Pfft, Guard A, who was not far away, could not help but burst into laughter. Seeing the two ladies looking over, he quickly waved his hand and said, I have been rude. Miss Shen, please continue. You are not allowed to ask anything. If young Master Qingshan heard it, he would be very happy. Miss Yungu blinked and turned back to look at Miss Lu. Anyway, you go ask Su Qingshan. You are not allowed to ask me. Miss Lu was speechless. She was used to the hypocrisy and civility of ordinary people. She had never seen such a direct person. For a moment she did not know how to deal with it. Chapter 11:25. After a long while Miss Lu came to her senses. She snorted and said, Anyway, you're not good enough for young Master Qingshan. If you know what's good for you, you'd better go far away. Otherwise, you'll embarrass yourself in the future. Yungu bit her lips and glared at LV Donruo angrily. After a long while she snorted and a proud smile appeared on her beautiful face. I don't want to. Su Qingshan is mine. You can't take him away. Young Master Qingshan won't marry a wild girl like you, LV Donruo said coldly. So what if I want to marry Su Qingshan? Yungu bared her teeth and said, I'm prettier than you, better at martial arts than you, and better at medicine than you. LV Donruo said disdainfully, What's the use of that? Without a good family background, you're not good enough for young Master Qingshan even if you're a fairy. Don't bother young Master Qingshan anymore or else. Or else what? Young Master Qingshan's voice came from behind her. It was as refreshing as a summer breeze, but it made LV Donruo's facial expression stiffen. Looking at young Master Qingshan who was walking in the moonlight, LV Donruo's eyes flashed with embarrassment, but she quickly hid it. She said shyly, Young Master Qingshan Donruo. Su Qingshan walked past LV Donruo and went directly to Yungu. He raised her little face and asked with a smile, What's wrong? Did someone bully you? Yungu rolled her eyes and ignored him. She would not be bullied. LV Donruo, who was ignored by Su Qingshan, was frozen in place. Her face turned green and white. She obviously did not expect that the gentle and elegant young Master Qingshan would not give her face. Seeing that Yungu was fine, Su Qingshan turned to look at LV Donruo and said lightly, Miss Lu, it's up to me to decide what kind of person is good enough for the Su family. It has nothing to do with you. The Su family doesn't need you to worry about it. If you're really bored, why don't you worry about yourself? LV Donruo's eyes reddened. She looked at Su Qingshan pitifully and said, Young Master Qingshan, you misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. Donruo just... Yungu poked her head out from behind Su Qingshan and grinned at LV Donruo. Her little face was full of pride. Su Qingshan lowered his head and saw her smiling face. He chuckled and said, Why are you so happy? Yungu snorted and said, She asked what you like to eat and what you hate. I don't know. You can tell her yourself. Oh. Do you really want me to tell her? Su Qingshan asked with a chuckle. Yungu was stunned. After a moment of silence she grabbed his arm and threatened him, You're not allowed to tell her. Otherwise what's wrong with you? Su Qingshan smiled. Facing Su Qingshan's smiling eyes, he couldn't bring himself to say the words, I'll beat you up. Yungu now somewhat understood why she had never dared to use her martial arts against Su Qingshan despite being so powerful. She couldn't bear to hit him at all. What if she broke it? The smile on Su Qingshan's face widened. He raised his hand to stroke her hair lovingly and said with a smile, Okay, I won't tell her. But I can tell you that you have to remember it seriously. Yes. Yungu nodded seriously. Okay, let's go. Holding Yunji's small hand, young Master Qingshan turned around and walked out. He didn't even look at LV Donruo who was standing at the side. Aren't you going to attend the banquet? Didn't I attend it? We're leaving Guangling tomorrow. Where does Yungu want to go? I want to go to a lot of fun places. Yungu said with a smile. Then let's go. The two guards who followed behind them turned back to look at LV Donruo who was left in the garden. Under the moonlight, her moon-white clothes and pale face looked a little frightening. What happened to her? Was she hit too hard? Stupid. Her acupoints were sealed. Yungu looked at her small hand that was being held by young Master Qingchen and turned back to look at LV Donrua, who was standing in the garden in a daze. She lowered her head guiltily. After leaving Guangling, the two of them traveled around and saved people. Just as Su Qingchen said, no one dared to bully her when she was with young Master Qingchen. In less than 2 months, Yungu saved more and more people and became more and more famous. Although she couldn't be compared to Xin Yang, who was known as the Miracle Doctor, she still received the title of Little Fairy Doctor. It was because Yunji's medical skills were superb at such a young age, and she was as beautiful as a fairy. The relationship between the two of them became more and more harmonious. Young Master Qingchen was also a person who loved the joy of mountains and rivers. Naturally, he was even more indulgent. Far away in the Prince Ding mansion in Glass City, the white-haired Prince Ding was facing all kinds of files and memorials in front of him. His brows were tightly knitted and his murderous aura was threatening. Where is young Master Qingchen? In the study, a man in gray lowered his head and reported, Prince, young Master Qingchen and Miss Shen just returned from the southern border. Judging by their route, they seem to be planning to go to West Hill. Prince Ding gritted his teeth. In other words, they don't plan to come back? This seems to be. Prince Ding's handsome face darkened and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Go. Tie him up and bring him back here for I. Instead of meddling in politics, he brings the young lady on a sightseeing tour. Prince Ding was extremely resentful. Now he couldn't even bring Miss Li on a sightseeing tour. The world had just settled down and there were many things waiting to be done. He didn't even have time to spend with Miss Li. Prince, isn't this not very good? Young Master Qingchen was the princess cousin. If he got angry, wouldn't the prince be the unlucky one? If the prince got angry, they would still be the unlucky ones. Go. I will discuss with the Su family. It's time for Su Qingchen and Yunji's wedding. What kind of scandal is it to always bring an unmarried girl out? Prince Ding's eyes flashed and he came up with a brilliant idea. It was time for Su Qingchen to get married. After the marriage, it was almost time for him to take over the Su family. After the marriage, they would have to give birth to children. After giving birth, they would have to educate the children. He just needed to ensure that Su Qingchen wouldn't run around in the next 3 to 5 years. As for the future, Prince Ding snorted. What does it have to do with I? This subordinate obeys. You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.